A life that is loved by God will be born. This was the prophecy in the Brelov family on the day the twins were born. His youngest daughter, Noxia, became his living proof. She grew up to be a respected girl with shiny silver hair and a noble smile. While still a child, she revealed extraordinary abilities and learned to freely control water. Everyone called her the girl beloved by the gods. But her twin sister, Tanazha Brelov, was completely different. Her hair was so black as if it had been soaked in dirty water. Those around her were discussing the girl quite loudly, not caring at all that she could hear everything. They continued to walk over her lifeless face, on which no one had ever seen a hint of a smile. The youngest daughter had long ago received special abilities, unlike her. Could twins really be so different? One of them seems to be blessed by the gods, but the other one, the conversation was interrupted by a meaningful silence. The hand holding the glass shook slightly, but the girl did not reveal her state of mind in any other way. Although the girl knew about the existence of such rumors about herself, she never expected to hear something like this at the Crown Prince's birthday party. The younger sister who got everything, and the older one who got nothing, is a very interesting topic for gossip among the nobles. If Tanasia can't stand their comments and leaves, they'll laugh at her even louder. But she chose a different path. Her hand with the glass flew up and then fell sharply, allowing glass and alcohol to fly around and causing quite a fright to those around. "Oh, I'm sorry," the girl said with as innocent an expression on her face as possible, hearing the frightened screams. "Today, everything will be different. It was you who was talking about me, yes," Tanasia continued, turning to one of the gossips and asking her to repeat since she had not heard, but she was seriously scared. Then the girl stepped on a glass on the floor and suggested that she had said something about the blessings of the gods that had been bestowed upon one person. So Tanasia was interested in what exactly she said about her, and she was eager to hear repetitions. "I was just looking forward to what you would show in the future," the gossip muttered, stumbling with fear and trying to hide behind her fan. Tanasia could not remember allowing such a discussion and advised to stop this shameless fight. But when the impudent woman asked again what she had said, clearly hurt by such public condemnation, Tanasia raised her voice significantly, demanding that they listen to her carefully. And she addressed everyone who wanted to discuss her. If she found out that someone dared to gossip about her behind her back, no matter who it was, she would tear his mouth apart. While saying all this, the girl smiled sweetly but ominously, so they shouldn't think that she would become easy prey. At first, she didn't know how she ended up in the world of the book she had once read. The last thing she remembers about her past life is the moment she quit her hated job and wanted to go on a trip. But the plane never reached its destination. It exploded almost immediately after takeoff, and she definitely died. Madam, please open your eyes, Lady Tanasia," the people around her shouted excitedly. She woke up in the body of someone from another world, and her name was Tanasia. Now, that is her name too. The doctor said that she fell from a horse at full speed, and that surviving after that was practically a miracle. But she didn't just move into someone else's body. It was Tanasia, Noxia's older sister, and the family name was Brelov. After some time, memories suddenly surfaced in the girl's head, to whom the name seemed familiar. The Beloved Saint is a very popular novel, the story of two sisters, two opposite characters. The younger sister, Noxia, who was loved by everyone, and the older sister, Tanasia, who was always compared to her because she did not have outstanding abilities. Tanasia always felt cut off from society and at some point began to desire what belonged to her sister. Why did God give her everything? Why didn't I receive anything? The girl asked herself these questions. And one day, Tanasia thought what would have happened if she had been born instead of Noxia, if she had been loved by people as much as Noxia, if their destinies had changed, and in this world Tanasia had become the main villain. Looking at her new body, she was surprised to realize that she had ended up in the body of this very girl. Perhaps it is because she constantly reads novels, but the shock of the situation was not so strong, and even she herself was surprised by such a reaction. The realization of reality came very quickly. First of all, she became a noblewoman. She died, so she can't go back to who she was, and it doesn't matter if she can go back at all. She doesn't miss that meaningless life in which there wasn't even a family. And here the situation is not so bad. Actually, she is quite beautiful, and any clothes suit her. The novel's Tanasia constantly compared herself to Noxia, time after time plunging deeper and deeper into the abyss of her own hell. But the new her is different from the former Taisia. She does not envy Noxia's appearance. character, or abilities. Here she is a young and beautiful girl, and also rich. She can indulge in luxury that she never saw in her past life, which fills the girl with happiness. But the cloudless days, full of carefree happiness, did not last long. One day, Tanasia was drinking tea, listening out of the corner of her ear to the conversations of the maids. They mainly discussed how she had become strange after falling from her horse. But they were also concerned about the news that people were disappearing more often. They said it was because of experiments to create human weapons. At these words, the girl became wary, trying to listen better to the conversations. But she literally choked on her tea when the maids mentioned the Kahlua Empire. Having assured the girls, who were frightened by the incident with the lady, that everything was fine with her, Tanasia carefully wiped her face. But with a darkened face, the girl asked to repeat what they had just said, specifically what was wrong with the Kahlua Empire. Shocked by her mistress, the maid timidly told her that there were some unpleasant rumors about the Kahlua Empire. It is said that the empire is conducting experiments to create weapons from humans. And this year, many more people have gone missing than last year, and there are rumors that they were kidnapped by the empire. But these are just rumors. Don't worry, madam. The maid tried to calm her down. Tanasia tried to remember where she had heard something like this and what it all meant. Oh my God, it was only now that she remembered that part of the plot and everything connected with it. The Arwen Empire, where the events of Beloved Saint take place, will enter into a war against the Kahlua Empire. The problem is that after the defeat, Lady Tanasia Brailov will be brutally killed, and her killer will be none other than Ascan, the main villain of the novel. He is the only survivor of experiments to create human weapons, the strongest creature in this world, and, without exaggeration, a real monster. Thinking over the new information, the girl tried to calm down. She still had time before the tragic events. Ascan escaped from a laboratory where he was being experimented on when he was 15 years old. But the tattered clothes looked like slave clothes, so he was captured and sold to the Arwen Empire. True, it was mentioned that Tanasia and Ascan were the same age. He was supposed to run away this year, it dawned on the girl. The young man walked slowly, step by step, going about his business. Where in the capital is the slave market? I need to go there right now. The girl jumped in, surprising the maid quite a bit with her suddenness. The lantern in the young man's hands swayed slightly, and its glare was reflected on the walls. I don't have time. Quickly prepare the carriage. Tanasia hurried, completely immersed in her thoughts. Excuse me, mistress. The man raised his hand and knocked carefully on the door. The girl, not expecting anyone, looked towards the door in surprise, but allowed the uninvited guest to enter. First, a man's leg appeared, and then the slightly unkempt-looking young man himself, who announced that the water for the bath was ready as she had ordered. Tanasia froze in place, having completely forgotten that she had given such an order. But then she looked closely at the guest, and was even more surprised, if not astonished. Kohl hair, deep golden eyes, tattoos in an ancient language around the neck. What is your name? She asked her slave, dumbfounded, already knowing what he would answer. Ascan, the guy answered in surprise, looking at her with his amazingly beautiful eyes. Wait, why is he in this estate? Tanasia couldn't believe it, becoming more and more horrified, because this wasn't in the original. In Beloved Saint, Ascan's escape from the lab was mentioned, but there was no mention of him becoming a slave to the Brailov family. However, the novel was not completed, so some details may not have been revealed yet. She was going to go in search of Ascan, but was it worth being happy that he was nearby? Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet call. Someone called her mistress, and she remembered that she was not alone in the room. Ascan asked the lady if she needed anything else and if he could go already. With difficulty distracting herself from her thoughts and the generally strange situation, Tanasia allowed the slave to leave. Without saying a word, the young man bowed and, turning very quickly, left the room. The girl thought that he did it too quickly. It seemed that he was avoiding her, and the maids were surprised that the mistress would let him go so easily. But when Tanasia turned around abruptly and asked what she was talking about, she became embarrassed, saying that she was talking about nothing. But still, with fear in her eyes, she explained that he left earlier than usual, and this was a bit unexpected. It seemed that Tanasia had done something with this slave, the girl guessed, and asked out loud what usually happened, referring to the foggy memories after the fall. Seeing that the maids were afraid to tell her, she promised not to be angry if they helped her regain her memory. Well, you disliked Ascan from the very beginning, one of the maids began timidly. The lady often made unflattering comments about his appearance, saying that she hated his black hair. The bath could be filled with water using a tap, but Tanasia made him carry buckets of water every day. And she punished him with lashes, just because for some reason she was in a bad mood. Tanaja listened to everything the maid said in confusion and seemed to begin to understand everything. It was as if a death flag had been raised over her head. Askin would hold a grudge for such cruel treatment and therefore kill her. But then a question ripened in Tanasia's head: how did he return to the Kahlua Empire? She couldn't have sent him there herself. In the original, Askan escaped from the lab and ended up in Arwen's empire, but at some point he was captured and then brought back. The reason was mentioned in passing, so she doesn't remember the details. But if their relationship remains the same, then she's definitely finished. "Shall we postpone the visit to the slave market until tomorrow?" asked the maid, puzzled by her mistress's silence. "No, the trip is canceled," Tanasia replied, completely lost in her thoughts. She can't lose another life, so she has to find a solution. That night she had her first dream since entering this new world. It wasn't even a dream, but a memory of how she found Askan at the slave market. The tattoos in the ancient language that covered his entire body were hard to miss. Not only that, but his body also contained a large number of magical formulas. So they tried to turn him into a living weapon. These were traces of violent, inhuman experiments. When she saw him for the first time, Tanaja realized that they had given the body of an ordinary person special abilities, and at that moment the girl thought that she too could receive the power of her younger sister Noxia, the ability to control water. This has always been her distinguishing feature, which she could not covet, but with these formulas and ancient writings, she will be able to master her sister's abilities. So Tanasia began to study Askan's body, but since such experiments are considered illegal, everything remained secret. The first thing she tried to do was to find out the secret of his abilities, and to do this in a very sophisticated way, using various tortures, including with a whip. "There is no point in resisting," the girl said, without a shadow of sympathy in her voice, standing in front of the captive. It was clear from his body that he was an unusual person, and it seemed that Tanasia was enjoying what was happening. She demanded with a smile that he explain to her what power he possessed. But Askan didn't make a sound. He just breathed shallowly, and his body shook with a small tremor. The man's yellow eyes, so similar to the eyes of an obstinate cat, spoke for themselves, expressing all that unspoken anger. The girl's eyes shone with cold cruelty, and with some sadistic anticipation she noted that he would remain silent until the very end. The blows of the whip rained down one after another, bringing her pleasure and him unbearable pain. But he held on, only his trembling barely revealing how much pain he was in. Tanasia, with particular anger and force, raised her hand and brought the whip down on the defenseless body. "Cuck," the man made a sound and tensed up, and the whip, touching the skin, made an unusual ringing sound. The girl froze in surprise, not understanding what was happening, but this did not last long. Touching his naked torso with her hand, she only confirmed the guess that came to mind. "What is this? The body has become stronger than steel," she said with a smile. The magical markings on Askan's back became brighter, clearly activating some unknown force. "With such strength one can defeat tens, hundreds of people, and her whip blows will not leave wounds." But Tanasia was not going to stop. The cruel beauty wanted to know how much this steel body could withstand. Hearing this, the man was really scared. He would not be able to maintain this state forever. "Stop!" The sleeping Tanasia asked the other Tanasia to stop, but it was all in vain. Time after time the whip flew into the air and fell on her naked body, but the girl still could not wake up from this nightmare. "Stop it. That's enough." A swing of the whip, followed by a blow and unbearable pain. "Enough!" Tanasia screamed especially loudly, although in fact she didn't make a sound, and opened her eyes wide. She lay in her bed, trying to comprehend what had just happened and what the dream meant. But the next moment she suddenly exploded, realizing one very important thing. Although it felt like a nightmare, it was actually not just a dream. More like memories before she entered Tanasia Brelov's body. Not only did she torture Askan, completely ignoring what he was experiencing, but the experiments did not leave him even here, far from the laboratory. If the story continues like this, there is a high probability that she sold Askan to the Kahlua Empire, and he will definitely return for revenge if the plot remains the same as in the original. At all costs, the girl decided to smooth over the insult of the slave whom Tanasia tortured. Therefore, first thing in the morning, having dressed and combed her hair, she, accompanied by a maid, personally came to Askan's room. Tanasia opened the doors and called his name loudly. not wanting to waste a minute of time. The young man had just finished washing himself and was drying himself with a towel, incredibly surprised by the appearance of the lady in his room. "What are you doing here?" he asked the girl, trying not to show his surprise. "You need something from me?" His tone of voice changed, became darker, and Tanasia noticed it too. Only now did she notice how careful he was with her, how polite he was, but not sincere. But what to expect if she bullied him and really deserved such treatment? "Nothing special," the lady replied. She decided that from that moment everything would change, because she told the young man that he was moving to a mansion, to a clean and bright place. But Askan did not understand how he was moving, and he thought that he had misunderstood her words. Tanasia reassured him that he no longer had anything to worry about, because he would live better. Beloved Saint was not finished, so she will try very hard to change the plot. "Askan, from this day on you will become my personal servant," Tanasia declared categorically. She will definitely reach a happy ending, the girl thought, looking into Askan's surprised eyes. Standing in his room, Mrs. Tanasia said that from that day on he would become her personal servant. Askan was at a loss as to what this meant and why she had come to him herself. But the only thing he understood was that this would not end well for him. Looking at the servant's darkened face, the girl thought that he was either doing a poor job of hiding his disgust, or that he wasn't even trying to do it. And you can understand it. It's hard to be around a person who has bullied you so much. But he cannot disobey, so Tanasia ordered him to pack his things, and they are leaving right now. The young man obediently replied that he understood everything, and began to carry out his mistress's order. While he was packing his things, Tanasia mentally asked him to be patient a little, because she planned to keep him close and correct all the mistakes. The most important thing she wants to achieve is for him to forget about his hatred for Tanasia. "Mistress, I'm ready." Askana's voice pulled her out of her thoughts, and the girl was surprised that he got ready so quickly. The servant stood in front of her with a small bag on his shoulder. Could these really be all his things? Tanasia asked in horror that he had worn the same clothes in winter, and the young man briefly confirmed this. A picture appeared in the girl's head of how poor frozen Askan was slowly turning into a snowdrift. "This won't do," she noted. "First he needs to find suitable clothes," and ordered the seamstress to be called. Although Askan tried to say that everything was fine, the girl insisted that her servant should look decent. And besides, she asked not to call her the mistress anymore, but to simply address her as lady. A soft clapping of hands could be heard throughout the room, calling for attention. "From now on, Askan is my servant. You will often see us together, so get used to it," Tanasia informed the assembled maids. And although the girls did not say anything, it was clear from their faces that they were horrified by the fact that they assumed that the mistress intended to keep poor Askan nearby for further abuse. The invited seamstress asked if it was possible to take the lady's measurements, but she replied that today they would only be working on Askan. The thread and needle worker stretched out a measuring tape, preparing for work. She apologized in advance and began taking measurements of the slightly frightened young man. The girls then discussed fabrics and styles that were currently trending, and Tanasia chose the most suitable ones. In the meantime, she asked the maids to tidy up Askan's hair, and the girls happily set to work. They combed the boy's hair as if he were a living doll, admiring the beauty of his hair. While waiting to try on clothes, Mrs. Tanasia leafed through a fashion magazine and sipped the tea that was served. It was a long time before the lady's attention was called out to her, and the girl eagerly raised her head. From behind the curtain came the sound that the first sample of the suit was ready for display, and almost immediately a man's foot stepped hesitantly into the room, causing the girls there to freeze in admiration. Askan was slightly embarrassed by the clothes that were so unusual for him, and he nervously tugged at his hair. But the maids, as well as Tanasia herself, were delighted with the sight that presented itself. It was a handsome man in an elegant suit, which undoubtedly suited him. The seamstress, presenting her work, which she was also very pleased with, asked how the lady liked it. "The investment paid off in full," Tanasia replied, and asked for the rest of the clothes to be delivered to the room. Then it was time for lunch, and the table was laden with all sorts of varied dishes. The girl asked if he wanted to eat, and with a sweet smile offered to eat as much as he wanted. Askan did not share the lady's enthusiasm, and with a gloomy expression on his face, he carefully picked up the fork and knife. Then he began to cut the meat lying on his plate very awkwardly, holding the fork incorrectly in his hands, piercing the meat as if he was afraid that it would run away. Tanasia watched him in surprise and came to the conclusion that he did not know how to cut meat. Then the girl asked the maid to cut the food, at the same time telling the servant that this time he would eat everything prepared, but in the future he would have to practice with a knife in his free time, since they would often eat together and he needed to get used to the cutlery. After finishing the meal, the girl suggested going for a walk to make dinner easier to digest, to which she received a simple yes in response. And although Askan supported any of her proposals, his reaction was even worse than she expected, as if he only knew one word. Tanasia thought that new things he never had would make him happy, but nothing worked. It was as if he had no feelings left, but the girl hoped that at least he would enjoy the walk. A full, bright moon was rising in the evening sky, illuminating the path for random passers-by and late-night revelers. A graceful female foot stepped carefully across the grassy ground, purposefully heading somewhere deep into the thicket. "Maybe we'll go even deeper," Tanasia said mysteriously, intending to find the most beautiful place for a walk. The servant only looked suspiciously at the lady. He did not understand at all what she wanted to achieve. Finally, the girl saw a suitable place and called the guy to follow her, offering to sit right there. In a small forest clearing, there are 2 cozy stumps, as if inviting you to sit down on them. Tanasia was the first to approach the improvised chair she liked and carefully sat down on it. The girl, very pleased with the place she had found, smiled and invited the servant to sit down. Askan obediently sat down on the offered chair, without showing a shadow of displeasure. "There's a wonderful view of the stars here," the girl noted, raising her head up and looking at the sky. She invited the young man to look at them too and appreciate all the beauty of the bright night sky. Submitting to the will of his mistress, Askan eagerly looked up, and what he saw impressed him greatly. The dark sky was strewn with bright flashes of stars. Somewhere a shooting star flared and went out, leaving behind a slowly fading flash of light. The spectacle was mesmerizing, and the impressed Askan could not take his eyes off it. It seemed as if these shining stars were about to descend to the earth, while at the same time they were reflected in the eyes of the observers. He was brought out of his reverie by Tanasia's question, asking if he liked the view, and then the guy's gaze moved to the girl. It turned out that she too was shining all over like the night sky, strewn with myriads of stars. Her whole appearance made an indelible impression on him, but his wounded soul was looking for a catch everywhere. They decided to change their approach. Askana's mood changed instantly. He remembered who he was and who he was with. Tanasia was surprised by such a sharp change in mood and such a rude answer, which she did not expect at all at such a mesmerizing moment. Askan continued that she herself said that he needed to find a way to take away Noxia's power or get rid of her if that was impossible. But even though she asked for such a thing, Askan himself is not able to do something like that. Tanasia's eyes widened in horror as the meaning of what the servant had said dawned on her. She was shocked that the girl had made such an unpleasant request. The memory of that same terrible whip with which she tortured her former slave came to mind, and she realized that she was doing something useless. Instead of blind kindness on her part, she should try to explain everything. "I'm sorry, Askan," she began with the first and most logical thing that came to her mind. Hearing words that he never expected to hear from the lady, Askan raised his head in surprise. Tanasia caused him a lot of trouble, so she asks for forgiveness for all her words and actions. She lost her memory when she fell off her horse, and it is hard for her to remember what happened between them, but her hatred for Noxia has evaporated. Listening in surprise as Tanasia says that she no longer cares about her sister's abilities and asks him to forget about that stupid assignment forever. The beautiful girl firmly promises that she will never bother him again. In the first moments, Askan's heart sank, listening to what she was saying. The thought flashed through his mind that they were speaking to him like a human being. But then the man's hands clenched, holding back his torn emotions. He promises, but it will be easier for him if she beats him and tramples him, as she usually did. These words are too unpleasant for him. The next day, Tanasia sat in class, but her thoughts were far away. Askan's mistrust was deeper than it seemed at first glance. Maybe it would be easier for her to let the story take its course, but would she be able to survive if she ran away to some remote place? No, Oland, the head of the Brelov family will not leave her alone, and it will be difficult for a 15-year-old girl to survive alone. Is it even possible to change fate? She thoughtfully closed her eyes. And then she opened it in fear, because someone called her name in a very stern voice. Metella, the tutor in the Brelov family, asked Tanasia with a smile to solve the problem she had just explained. The girl, of course, agreed to try. Although she understood that she had not listened to the teacher's explanation at all, because she was immersed in her thoughts. She looked at the board and the given example, thoughtfully raising the pen to her face. And what she saw there puzzled her a little. Everything turned out to be much simpler than she thought. "The answer is 13, Tanaja said after a short silence. Metella was surprised that the lady had solved this problem without the help of paper in her head, and the girl added sheepishly that her method was a little different from what the teacher had done. She thought it would be easier this way and showed the teacher exactly how she had solved the problem, while wondering to herself why she understood it. Looking at the solution to the problem, Metella said that she knew about her abilities, but they exceeded all her expectations. After all, Lady Tanasia is usually so stubborn that it is impossible to convince her of anything, but today she must acknowledge her efforts. And then a stack of books appeared in the teacher's hands, and she offered to look through them and determine if there was anything that the lady could not cope with. Leafing through one book after another, Tanasia noted that she definitely understood everything in them. But Metella pointed to one of the books that contained advanced magical formulas and materials that they had not yet studied. The lady definitely had a natural talent for solving magical formulas. To Tanasia's surprise, Metella saw no point in wasting time and effort on practical magic or spirit magic. But the girl thought that it was so natural that she didn't even think about it. But then she remembered that in her dream, she saw magical formulas and ancient writings on Askin's body. Tanasia quickly realized what experiments were conducted on him, because she can read magic formulas. It turns out that she simply did not develop her talent, focusing on what is related to Noxia and does not suit her. True, this is one of the ways to solve her problem in this world, if she finds a use for her talent. As if cutting into her thoughts, Metella emotionally finished by saying that Lady Tanasia could become the best scientist in the entire empire and even on the entire continent. Of course, if she is not going to hide it, and the head of the family will be happy when he finds out, and will certainly provide all kinds of support. The teacher's eyes lit up. "Okay," Tanasia answered quietly after a short thought, which once again surprised her teacher, who was indulging in dreams. She asked Metella to tell her father about this, because she would be glad to see him happy. Besides, she added mentally, there was no point in her repeating the path of the real Tanasia. This was another chance to change fate. After finishing the lesson, she went out for a walk in the garden with the servant. The girl was in a great mood, because new opportunities appeared on the horizon, and she felt hope. Turning back to Askan, Tanasia thought that it was clear from the beginning that she could not completely trust her fate to Askan's heart, so she needed to find a way to protect herself on her own. The girl, who was calmly walking, was suddenly distracted by an incomprehensible sound, and someone's frightened shout, "Be careful," came from the garden, and Tanasia watched in shock as something flew towards her. The next moment, the girl was doused with cold water from head to toe, completely soaking her. She looked with displeasure in the direction from which the scream came, because she undoubtedly recognized that voice. "Oh, sister," the young blonde girl babbled in fear, very frightened by what had happened. It was Noxia, Tanasia's younger sister and the main character of the novel. From somewhere behind Tanasia's back, a folded man's handkerchief was extended towards her. "Lady, are you okay?" Askin was worried about his mistress and handed her his handkerchief. The girl gratefully accepted the help, but noticed that he was also wet, to which the servant asked her not to worry. At the same time, Noxia apologized in a frightened voice to her doused sister, saying that she did not do it on purpose. The girl was very scared, expecting a reaction from her sister, but she opened her eyes in surprise when she heard that everything was fine. "I said I'm fine," Tanasia repeated, wiping her wet face. She remembered that there was a similar scene in the original. The maids wanted to see Noxia's abilities, and she got excited and lost control. "It's just an accident, don't worry," Tanasia said to her sister with a smile. The younger sister even blushed from her sister's attitude towards her, but she expected a completely different reaction and was ready for it. "But don't practice here," Tanasia added, and the girl nodded her head vigorously in agreement. It was best not to make such mistakes in places where family guests might pass, and Noxia had not thought of this. Two maids immediately jumped up, frightened that Lady Tanasia would scold Lady Noxia, and began to assure her that she was not guilty of anything, and it was they who begged her to show them strength. "Do you understand your mistake?" Tanasia asked in a stern voice, pointing her finger at the maids. They nodded fearfully, and the girl added that they should not ask Noxia for such a thing again. She could not refuse because of her gentle nature. But the maids answered without enthusiasm, and then Tanisha suggested repeating it again. But the girls were already seriously scared and assured the lady that they remembered. Noxia, who was watching all this, looked at her older sister with admiration, and then quietly thanked her, thereby incredibly surprising what she is thanking you for. The younger sister was very grateful that Tanisha accepted her apology and stood up for her. Tanasia believed that there was no need to thank them for such trifles, since they were sisters. The girls were talking nicely, but at some point Tanasia turned around and noticed something. Askin's clothes were soaking wet, and through them showed the scars that had not yet healed, the cause of which was she herself. The servant stood to the side, pretending that nothing had happened and everything was fine. I have to go. I'm going, Noxia. She suddenly ended the conversation with her sister, but the girl noticed that her older sister's face became gloomy, and she was afraid that she had made a mistake again. Tanasia and Askan returned to the room, and the lady immediately turned to the servant. Askin, take off your top for a minute, she ordered, and he had no choice but to obey. The young man assumed that everything could happen again, and now the lady wants to do it now. He obediently began to unbutton his vest and undress. He did as he was ordered while Tanisha was looking for something in the closet. She had inflicted these wounds and she needed to use the medicine before they got worse, the girl thought. After a short search, she finally found the necessary jar and took it out of the cupboard. Then she turned to Askan, hoping that this amount of medicine would be enough. But then a surprise awaited her. A half-naked Askan was kneeling in the middle of the room. Tanasia was shocked by the servant's actions, especially by the fact that he knelt down. But after a moment, it dawned on her what Askan was thinking. Just like in that dream, she whipped the servant's naked body to test his abilities. He thought that her request was an order, and now everything would happen again. Without saying another word, the girl walked around the young man, intending to start from behind. Askin seemed to have resigned himself to his fate and was prepared to endure everything. Opening the medicine bottle, she scooped up a small amount of ointment with her finger, and she began to treat the obviously painful scars on the servant's body. Immediately, there was a loud knock, and Askin jumped back from the girl in fear, asking in fear what she was doing. Pointing to the jar in her hand, Tanisha replied that she was, of course, applying medicine, and she asked me to try not to move. This medicine prevents infection. That's why it stings. As she tended to the wounds, she thought that her kindness might not achieve anything, but she couldn't ignore this child's wounds. He still looked at her with suspicion, but did not resist help. Being kind to Askin is a small insurance against an unpredictable future and her personal whim. Tanasia began to think again about how to avoid the path to death. Maybe she should try to prevent the war on her own. If the clash between the empires does not occur, then many things can change. The Brelov family will not be exterminated, so it will remain under protection, and the commander of the enemy army, Askan, will not kill it. If she doesn't let him be taken to the lab, the Kahlua Empire's experiment could fail, as he played a key role in its success. But the main question is how she should use her abilities. And at the moment, absolutely nothing comes to her mind about this, the girl thought as her head slowly bowed down. Lady, the servant's quiet voice rang out, and Tanasia looked up sleepily. It was already morning, and the maid was worried that her mistress had slept all night in the library. Was everything okay with her? With a significantly crumpled appearance and a hoarse voice, the girl answered that everything was fine, and she dozed off for only a second, although she herself understood that she had been thinking all night and had fallen asleep. The master invited you to have dinner together, said the maid, and volunteered to help the mistress get ready. Tanasia thought, the gentleman is the head of the family, Olin Brelov, her father. But why so suddenly? It was her first time meeting him after entering this body, and so she was a little nervous as she headed to the dining room accompanied by Aswan. Olin Brelov has a clear mind and a wonderful character. It was he who raised the family's reputation so high. Despite his strong business acumen and cool image, he was extremely caring towards his daughters. Everything should be fine, the girl tried to calm down. We make it look natural, even more natural. When Tanasia entered the dining room, her father and younger sister were already sitting in their seats. Long time no see, Tanasia. Oland greeted his daughter with a smile. But the first thing that surprised the girl was why her father looked so young. But then she remembered that there were rumors that her father and late mother had married at an early age. Maintaining an outward calm, Tanasia noticed that he had already arrived and asked if he had any work today. Oland replied that there was work, but he changed his schedule to give her the gift, which greatly surprised Tanasia. A servant approached at that moment and politely opened a red box in front of her. inside which a beautiful necklace sparkled with a red shine. Metella told me everything. It seems you have an outstanding talent in the field of magical formulas, Oland explained, adding that the gift was congratulatory, and he hoped that she would like it. He also asked his daughter, who did not expect this, to think seriously about her future, and he, for his part, would do everything to support her. Watching her father's satisfaction, Tanaja was surprised to think that he had put aside his work just to congratulate her, because he could have simply sent the gift to the room. It turns out that he was much more attentive than she thought. Noxia also happily congratulated her sister and noted that the necklace was so beautiful and would definitely suit her. By the way, there will soon be a ball in honor of the prince's birthday, and it will be wonderful if Tanasia wears this jewelry for the celebration. Here, Tanasia became a little worried because she remembered that this event in the novel is of key importance. This is the event where the main characters met for the first time. The main male character is Roald de Franz Arwen, the crown prince of the Arwen Empire. After their first contact, they danced all evening at the ball, and that same evening they began to feel attracted to each other, which eventually grew into true love in adulthood. Of course, Tanasia was a villain, so she tried to separate them in every possible way. But what will happen if she does not interfere with them, but, on the contrary, supports the love of the main characters? If she does not try to destroy them, the likelihood of her death will definitely decrease. Noxia, Tanasia suddenly turned to her sister, turning the necklace in her direction. With a smile, the girl offered her sister to take this necklace. The younger sister was literally taken aback by such a proposal, as was the head of the Brelov family. A minute later, Noxia waved her hands, insisting that she had not spoken of the necklace's beauty in order to take it for herself, to which Tanasia noted that she knew, but her sister would look better in it at the ball. The younger sister still tried to refuse such a gift, but the older one insisted, assuring that it would suit her perfectly, and she offered to help Noxia choose a suitable dress, while thinking that she herself did not want to stand out too much, and it would be better to bring Noxia to the forefront, thereby making the first meeting of the main characters more successful. Noxia literally beamed at this proposal, but still asked incredulously if she would really help her with the dress. And when Tanasia answered in the affirmative, she even clapped her hands, she was so happy about it. Oland, watching their dialogue, noted that he had never seen such a good relationship between the daughters before. And turning to Tanasia, he said that she would not have to sacrifice anything. And then he called the servant, ordering him to prepare another necklace for his second daughter, which shocked Tanasia. Noxia, beaming with happiness, asked when they could choose dresses. And still not having recovered from her father's actions, Tanasia replied that at any time. Oland Brelov was in a good mood and suggested discussing all pressing issues over dinner. While the Brelov family was happily having fun, eating and talking, they were being watched. Askan silently and from a distance watched the happy family's ordinary dinner. Lady Tanasia stood out in particular. He couldn't believe his eyes. Could this be the same girl who tried to forcefully find out his secret? A barely perceptible chill ran across Tanasia's skin. She felt with her skin that someone was looking at her. The girl turned around to confirm her suspicions, looking for the observer, and noticed her servant. Askan flinched in surprise, especially at what happened next. Tanasia looked straight at him and smiled very friendly. Their eye contact lasted only a couple of seconds. Then the lady turned and continued talking to the family. Askan froze in his place, feeling his wounded heart pounding. The thoughts did not want to form any clear thoughts and circled only around Lady Tanasia. But then the young man's fists clenched in anger, not so much at her, but at himself. What was he thinking about? That night, his fists clenched in horror at the sheets of his personal bed as Askan slept in it. The young man was tormented by nightmares, causing his body to sweat, but they did not want to release his mind from captivity. He ran with all his might through the dark night forest, trying to escape as far as possible. He ran quickly, stepping barefoot on the cold ground, injuring his bare feet on branches and stones, but one stone did not want to let him pass, and Askan stumbled. As he fell, he hit the ground painfully, not having the strength to get up and continue running. Besides, it was already too late. His pursuers were already there and surrounded him. "Askan, you thought you could escape," came the mocking question. One of them took out 2 pieces of some kind of weapon. When they connected, they emitted a thick purple mist, generating a powerful and deadly force. With horror in his eyes, Askan listened that before his death, and even after his death, he would never be able to escape from the Kahlua Empire. Horror. That was the last thing he felt in his worthless life, and his eyes widened, unable to bear it. Askan opened his eyes and breathed heavily in his bed. He hadn't been able to rest properly since his escape from the laboratory. And all because of the bastards who haunt him even in his nightmares. He could not sleep any longer, so he got up and opened the only closet in the room. There, in the depths, was hidden a bag containing the servant's few simple belongings that he had managed to collect. When Lady Tanasia's whims are over, he will have to return to his former place. So there was no point in expecting anything, Askan thought, watching the barely perceptible purple glow that was pouring from the depths of the old battered bag. Ever since his origins were revealed, he has been trying to find a way to leave the Brelov family. But it will be difficult for pursuers from the Kahlua Empire to penetrate the estate of such a high-ranking nobleman, so it is safer here for now. He will find a more suitable place and collect enough funds for the trip. He came here because he saw opportunities for himself. And now all that remains is to wait for the right moment to do what we have planned. Having dressed in the morning, Askan walked along the corridors of the servants' wing, getting ready to begin his direct duties. "Huh? Who do we have here?" came from behind, and the young man turned around. "You really perked up when you got a new job. Now you won't even say hello," one of the men standing in the corridor asked mockingly. These were the people with whom Askan had previously lived in the same room. Not knowing what to answer, he simply bowed in greeting. But the bully wasn't satisfied with this, and he threateningly shook the wrench he was holding in his hands. "Arrogant bastard," came an angry cry, and Askan felt a painful push to his head. The same wrench fell next to the servant's feet, but now with traces of blood. The second man asked fearfully what if he told the lady everything, but the bully did not calm down, continuing to get angry and threaten Askan that he would definitely smash his skull in. Askan looked in surprise at his bloody hand, which he rubbed over the bruise. "Next time warn me you got my clothes dirty," he said calmly, as if nothing serious had happened. The former neighbor became furious at these words. Could it really be that rags were making a nobleman out of him? Askan listened silently as the man was seething with anger, certain that he would soon be thrown out into the street. Enough already, he was always a strange guy. The second man tried to calm him down, and these words reminded Askan of something. "You are a walking bomb, devastating everything around you when your emotions break out," the professor warned him. Askan can easily take the life of another person if he uses his power, but it is impossible to control. Once he starts releasing it, he will not stop until he destroys everything around him. He usually doesn't get angry about such attacks, but now he's a little angry. "And when will I leave Askana?" A melodic female voice rang out in the corridor. All the men turned their heads at once, not expecting to see its owner in the servants' corridor. "A lady," Askan said questioningly. And Tanasia replied that she had to look for him due to a sudden change in her schedule. "I didn't think I'd see such an interesting sight," the girl added with a grim grin. Frightened by the appearance of their mistress, the servants immediately began to bow and ask for forgiveness. But Tanasia ordered them to apologize to Askan, since it was he who was injured by the thrown object. The servants could not disobey their mistress, and so they meekly apologized, but Askan noticed that nothing terrible had happened. Although Tanasia was pleased, she decided not to let the presumptuous servants get away with this. And that's why she only warned them once, because she doesn't have the best character. And if he touches what belongs to her, he will greatly regret it. "Get lost before I change my mind." Tanasia made a motion with her hands as if a cat had released its claws, and the frightened servants hurried away. Only Askan and the lady remained in the corridor, who was still radiating indignation, much to the servants' surprise. "How are you? What's wrong with the wound?" the girl asked, worried, to which Askan replied that it was nothing serious. His answer outraged Tanasia. Hadn't he heard what she said, that he was her man and belonged to her? Therefore he must not be injured without her permission. This is an order. Confused by the lady's behavior, the young man replied that he understood everything. Remembering why she came, Tanasia hurried him, because Noxia was already waiting. But when Askan asked where they were going, she replied that they had agreed to choose outfits for the ball. Then Askan asked to leave him here, and he would treat his wound himself. "What are you talking about?" The girl was surprised. "You need a suit to attend the party." At this point, Askan was surprised he needed a suit, so it turned out he was also going to the ball. A little later in the fitting room, the young man really regretted that he had agreed to the suit. The seamstress assistant showered him with compliments and offered various options. Noxia was surprised to see that everything suited him, and Tanasia was pleased that the investment had paid off. She also praised her younger sister's excellent taste, as she really liked the dress she chose. "We'll take this suit." The girl stopped at the last option and ordered Askan to change. "There is only a dress left for Tanasia Brelov herself." She loves shopping, but it takes too much energy. The girl longingly leafed through the offered magazines with samples of evening dresses, but everything was wrong. Then the seamstress brought a large hanger with a huge number of multicolored dresses. She prepared outfits that suited the lady's taste, but it was not so, and in Tanasia's opinion, it was more suitable for Noxia. It seemed that Tanasia was repeating everything after her younger sister, and the girl replied that her tastes had changed, so she would wear something else. The girl turned her head with interest, looking around the store. For example, this one, she pointed her finger at the red and black dress standing in the corner. The seamstress noticed that this was an unusual choice and suggested trying on the dress, to which Tanasia asked to immediately pack the purchase. Hearing this, Noxia was indignant that she had spent so much time on their outfits but would not try them on herself, to which the girl retorted that she could already see that the dress fit, and she was just a little tired. Tanasia wanted to pay for the purchases immediately, and Noxia could only come to terms with her decision. While the ladies sat waiting, they were offered tea, and now a maid was carrying a tray with drinks, which trembled mercilessly in her hands. "Your tea?" The maid's voice trembled as much as her hands, and she looked very scared. Tanasia thanked her, although she was surprised that the girl was so tense. At this time, the maid was putting cups on the table and accidentally touched one of them with her hand. The cup fell to the floor with a crash, startling Tanasia quite a bit and staining her dress. Tanasia was very frightened by the surprise and sat frozen, while Noxia was worried about her condition and the maids were worried about the ruined dress. A wet tea stain was spreading across the hem of the girl's dress, leaving an unpleasant feeling of heaviness. Askan was the first to come to his senses after the incident and approached the lady. The girl noticed him but did not expect what would happen next. The servant knelt down in front of the girl and began to wipe the hem of her dress with a napkin. "Lady, are you hurt?" Askan looked up at Tanasia, worried about her. But she didn't know what to say. This whole situation was out of the ordinary. "I just got wet," she managed to squeeze out, feeling a little awkward because of the servant kneeling. After some time, Askan finished and noticed that the stain could not be removed, but at least there would be no feeling of dampness. "God, what madness!" thought Tanasia. Of course, for a servant this is quite natural, but she has strange feelings. Until now, she had only seen Askan's cautious side. And although he acts as a servant should, strange sensations do not leave her. Yielding to some impulse, Tanasia extended her hand to him. The girl touched the young man's head and stroked his hair. His behavior seemed sweet to her. The lady reached out and stroked the stunned servant's head. Askan didn't immediately understand what was happening. It was all so strange, but she continued to stroke his hair. Tanasia herself realized that she had acted strangely, but she could not resist this impulse. After a few moments, finally realizing what it looked like, she abruptly pulled her hand back and thanked him for his help. Obedient Askan turned out to be too cute, and Tanasia wondered if that was really her taste. There was another involuntary observer of this strange scene, Noxia, whose cheeks were covered with a barely noticeable blush. "Forgive me again," the seamstress and the maid asked in chorus. Bowing to the mistress, they didn't even know how they could correct such a mistake. Tanasia hoped that it would not end with a simple apology, and the seamstress confirmed that they would, of course, compensate, and asked to let her know if the lady wanted anything specific. The girl confidently said that the store would pay for cleaning the dresses and shoes, and if the stain did not come off, they would send a new outfit. "Will there be punishments like last time?" the seamstress asked warily. But Tanasia did not immediately understand what she meant. What punishments? The woman reminded that in the past, the mistress personally flogged the offender and asked to forgive them at least today. Tanasia was horrified by what she heard, but everything fell into place. Now it is clear why the worker was shaking so much. She was scared of her and began to get nervous. She also doesn't have the most pleasant character, but Tanasia from the original beat up those around her, who would have thought that she personally beat up the fitting room workers. And then the girl thought about how she looked from the outside. I wonder what Askan is thinking, and what's wrong with Noxia, who is quietly waiting for her decision. Are they so familiar with this situation that they have become accustomed to it, and how she wants to say that she did not do it? "We made a mistake, so there must be punishment." The maid seemed to have already resigned herself. But Tanasia stopped her, saying that there would be no punishment. She also asked if the workers she had punished before were still here, and was told that they had taken measures to ensure that they did not appear here. "There is no need for that. You can return them if you wish," the girl added, and suggested that the money for cleaning the dress be given to the dismissed workers as compensation. The fitting room workers were so shocked that they stood there with their mouths open. Noxia was also surprised, but even glad that this time Tanasia was acting like a human being. She will often encounter similar things in Tanasia's body, but everything can be fixed. We thank you, Lady Brelov. We will be glad to see you again. All the fitting room workers came out to see Tanasia off. I survived. The maid who poured the tea breathed a sigh of relief. Although she was happy about it, she wondered what happened and why she forgave her. At this time, Ascan was paying for the ladies' purchases, and therefore heard the girls' entire conversation. They complained that they would never know the thoughts of the nobles. Maybe something good happened to Lady Brelov, and that is why she became kinder. I don't know why she changed so abruptly, but the rumors could be the opposite, the fitting room manager concluded. Ascan also did not understand the ladies' behavior, but he had nothing to add to the girls' conversation. The carriage with the sisters arrived at the Brelov mansion, and Noxia got out first. Turning around, she asked her sister if she was going to go out, to which Tanasia replied that she would make one more circle. She needed to collect her thoughts. Okay, thanks for your help. Noxia smiled sweetly, and Tanasia waved her hand in a friendly manner to her sister. The horses set off, taking the carriage for a short ride. The girl wondered if that money would be enough for compensation, but even if she paid more, rumors would spread. Traces of Tanasia's evil deeds remain even where she was not, and many are still unknown to her. But were there any mistakes that her current self made? If I don't find a way to protect myself, the girl thought tiredly, but then her thoughts were interrupted when she looked straight ahead. Opposite her in the carriage sat Ascan, whom she had completely forgotten about. She should have let him go with Noxia. There were things Tanasia needed to think about alone. Ascan's gaze sharpened, and the whole atmosphere around him became somehow ominous. Tanasia noticed this, and, not understanding what had suddenly happened, asked if he wanted to tell her something. We've already discussed this. There was a metallic note in the servant's voice. He didn't understand her intentions, and it irritated him. He wants her to tell him honestly what she wants from him. The girl sincerely did not understand what the problem was, but such a revelation from the servant shocked her. But after thinking a little, she remembered what happened in the fitting room of the store. Namely, the moment when she stroked his head and found him cute. Is it because I stroked your head? She asked directly, and now Ascan was confused by her open question. In the dream, Tanasia beat him many times, but he didn't make a sound, but he reacted strangely to such a simple compliment. By the way, when she showed him the starry sky, something similar happened. At first, Tanasia thought that he was unhappy with her sudden change, but it seems that this is not the only reason. Ascan, this is your first time. This is the first time you were called cute. This is the first time you looked at the stars. The girl asked point blank, stunning the servant. But he did not answer, considering all this to be of no importance. The girl thought with a smile that, although he didn't answer, he didn't deny it either. So what should she do about it in that case? Tanasia forgot one important thing, because he acts very mature. In the novel, he is the greatest villain, but now Ascan is just a boy. Running a strand of her hair through her hand, the girl added that this was very important, because if this is really the case, then she will try even harder in the future. The young man froze at such frankness, opening his eyes in surprise at his mistress. Many thoughts were running through his head, but he couldn't say anything. Meanwhile, Noxia was slowly returning to her room after the trip. In the corridor, she was met by maids who were very worried about the lady. Noxia didn't understand why they were worried, but they explained that it was immediately clear that Lady Tanasia was just pretending to want to help choose a dress, and she probably recommended something ugly. The girl was horrified by the maids' assumptions and asked them not to say that again. My sister chose a dress that Noxia liked. There were many beautiful options, so she helped a lot. One of the maids said with a grin that their master was too kind, but she had better prepare herself for her sister's tricks. They say she plans to ruin Noxia's dress for the ball. The girl thought deeply, although it hurt her, but it could be true. She had gotten into trouble many times before because of her older sister, but this time, something was very different in Tanasia's behavior. Her reaction to Noxia accidentally splashing water on her was that she wasn't angry at all, and the way she reacted to her father's gift, and seemed to sincerely believe that it would suit Noxia better. Even the way she chose a dress for her sister's behavior lately was so sincere, and Noxia hadn't felt such kindness since her abilities first manifested. Perhaps they would become close people again. So, thank you for your concern, but please don't say that again, she asked the maids. Noxia sincerely believes that her older sister wants to change. The maids did not expect that their mistress would defend her sister, and so they sheepishly agreed. And then to Noxia's surprise, they hurried away, citing business. The girl herself also had a hard time forcing herself to do this, but she thinks she tried hard. I can't forget the moment when Tanaja stroked her servant's head. Noxia's hand slowly rose into the air and approached her head. Does this mean that Tanaja should also pat her on the head for a job well done? Tanaja was present at some reception and gloomily listened as those around her discussed her behind her back. That she is the eldest daughter of the Brelov family, but her appearance and abilities are no different from her younger sister. It is hard to believe that they are twins. It seems that the good genes went to the younger one and the older one took the rest. Laughter was heard from those talking. The maid serving drinks accidentally bumped into Tanaja and apologized in fear when she saw the expression on her mistress's face. "You want to laugh too?" The voice sounded as if the devil himself was speaking. The already frightened maid was suddenly grabbed by the arm, and Tanaja dragged her into another room. She believed that an apology alone was not enough, so she ordered the girl to follow her. There, away from prying eyes, Tanasia Brelov took out all her anger on the innocent girl, warning her that she would greatly regret it if she screamed. At this point, Tanasia woke up, realizing with great difficulty and relief that it was just a dream. And although these strange dreams were repeated more than once, the girl thought that this was not just a dream. The door creaked and a maid entered the room, seeing that the lady had already woken up. Jaren, Tanasia's personal maid, noticed her mistress's strange look and assumed that she was having a nightmare. And when she confirmed her assumption, she warmly asked the lady to forget about the bad. After all, there will be a ball at the Imperial Palace today, and many good things are sure to happen in the evening. That's right, today, Noxia, the main character of the novel and Crown Prince role will meet for the first time. What could go wrong was to just keep quiet, so Tanasia decided that she would just watch Askin and the ball. Massage, makeup, dress fitting, many hours were spent preparing for the ball. Tanasia had not even left home when she already felt the desire to go back and not go anywhere. As she was walking down the stairs from the second floor, she saw Askan waiting for her at the bottom. The young man looked dazzling, and the colors of his suit matched the colors of her dress. Coming down, Tanasia first asked how long he had been waiting for her, but the servant replied that he had just arrived, and then the girl noticed that he looked amazing. "That's too much praise," he answered reservedly, opening the door for the lady. After all, he simply wore what the lady chose, but Tanasia believed that fashionable clothes only complemented his appearance, and his handsome face shone even brighter. Askin was a little embarrassed by such an open compliment from the lady, although he didn't show it in any way. But the girl noticed his reaction and was surprised that he did not know about his beauty. The servant tried to say that the lady had recently too, but he couldn't finish, and Tanasia asked again what he meant. "You are too straightforward." Askin blushed like a tomato, unable to look the girl in the eyes. But Tanasia seemed to understand what he wanted to say and was very impressed. "How sweet. That's a compliment," she asked, blushing slightly. At that moment, Noxia looked out of the window of the carriage, which they had already approached, and joyfully called out to her sister. And she asked no less joyfully whether they would travel together in the same carriage, because usually they traveled separately. When Tanasia replied that of course, together, the younger sister beamed even more. She was glad that this time everything was different. "There is no point in separating. We are sisters." Tanasia was also glad about this. It was already getting dark, and the lights were turned on in the palace when the sisters arrived at the place where the ball was being held. "Look, it's the Brelov twins." The whispers of those around them spread throughout the hall. They heard about them, the younger one, the light and the older one, the shadow, so they whispered. Tanasia thought that everything was happening just like in the dream she had seen in the morning, and was already beginning to understand why Tanasia was riding in a separate carriage. It's as if they whisper on purpose when she passes by. It's annoying. Askin also heard all these whispers behind his back, but as a servant he could not do anything. Tanasia thought that she should let Noxia go so that her meeting with Roll would be more natural. And the sisters split up. Noxia went into the crowd of girls, and Tanasia wanted to walk with Askan. She needed something to drink to clear her mind. Askin was new here, so she decided not to drag him along with her. And quickly turning around, she walked towards the exit to the garden, not noticing the servant's gaze directed at her. And the young man could not take his eyes off the girl. In Askan's eyes, Lady Brelov seemed to be the night sky, strewn with bright stars. Her hair is so black as if it had been rolled in mud. He heard the ladies passing by talking. It was unpleasant for him to hear this, but he still noticed that Tanasia's face was so sad. They say that all the abilities went to the younger sister, and the older one picked up the leftovers. And she has the same necklace as Lady Noxia. She just copied her. She tries to imitate her sister again, but what's the point of copying such insignificant things? They are useless orphans. No one will know if they die during experiments. Askan heard this in the Kalua Empire, and something similar was said now about Lady Tanasia. Unpleasant memories stung the young man painfully, and he became completely immersed in them. But he was brought out of his reverie by a loud, unexpected sound of something falling and breaking. Turning towards the sound, he saw Lady Tanasia arguing emotionally with another lady about something. Askan wanted to intervene, but he was stopped by the tone in which the lady spoke. If I find out that anyone dared to talk about me behind my back, no matter who it is, I will rip his mouth apart. She sounded scary. The servant literally froze, his mouth open, looking at such a bold girl. Tanasia turned and headed towards Askan, leaving the destruction behind. Askan, let's go outside, the girl said calmly and headed towards the exit. As she walked into the garden, Tanasia thought that she needed to cool down a bit. Otherwise, she would be no different from the real Tanasia. Askan broke the silence they had maintained since they left, and he asked if the lady was really going to rip their mouths apart, which made the girl choke. Embarrassed, Tanasia replied that she would not do such a thing. Then Askan asked if it was a lie. No, it was not a lie, but only a warning to others. Some people only understand crude threats, but the girl was interested in why the servant was asking about this. Maybe he was afraid that she would actually tear someone's mouth. And Askan confirmed that the lady was quite capable of this. Trying to change the subject, Tanasia asked how he had enjoyed the ball, aside from the fact that she had ruined the whole atmosphere, to which the servant replied that he had not seen anything special. The girl noted with regret that she thought he would at least like it a little. Askan thought for a moment and looked closely at his mistress. How unexpected that Tanasia, who had always caused trouble for the Brelov family, found herself the target of other nobles. In an aristocratic society, it is easy to flatter the strong and trample the weak. Tanasia was on the side of the weak. When she suddenly fought back, it felt as if those words applied to his pursuers as well. Witnessing Lady Tanasia's behavior like this, Askan felt a strange satisfaction. He doesn't like the place itself, but this situation suits him just fine. But what she wanted to show him was where she was leading now. Askan's gaze fell on Tanasia again. She was strong and beautiful at that moment. Her whole appearance was mesmerizing, and the young man could not take his eyes off her. But suddenly, in what seemed to be a quiet night, quiet voices were heard. Tanasia also heard them and quietly called Askana by name. The next moment, she grabbed the servant by the lapel of his jacket and pulled him towards her. Not far from them, in a dark garden, two young men were talking. Tanasia forced Askan to hide in the bushes and ended up on top. Quiet, the girl put her finger to her lips, asking Askan not to make noise. Tanasia's face was in close proximity to the young man's face, and the girl asked him to endure a moment of discomfort. In the Brelov family, I don't want to worry about things like that, like problems. Snippets of someone else's conversation could be heard. If Tanasia had time to see correctly, this is a guy with red hair, with bright clothes. Then this is the one she is thinking about. Friendship with Lady Brelov may be useful in the future, Your Highness the Prince. The second speaker confirmed Tanasia's assumption. She knew it. It was the back of the main character of Beloved Saint. Roel is the young and only crown prince of the Arwen Empire. It turns out that next to him is his loyal vassal Rigald. The prince replied that he did not come to play games, but that his desire was to make Arwen's empire even stronger when he became emperor. Rigald understood this, but believed that the prince should enlist their support. Tanasia listened with mixed feelings as Roel complained that he was being forced to hang around Lady Brelov, who didn't interest him at all. If Roel finds out that she heard him, their relationship could get seriously damaged. And she whispered to Askana if he was uncomfortable, and told him to leave quietly. "Sister, what are you doing here?" Noxia appeared in front of them out of nowhere, surprised. Tanasia was incredibly surprised by this, but also scared. The crown prince and his vassal also saw Noxia, and also experienced mixed feelings. Who's here, Roel, as befits the crown prince, remained unperturbed. He didn't think anyone else would go that far from the banquet hall. The girl ceremoniously greeted His Highness the Prince, and she introduced herself as Noxia from the Brelov family, at the same time introducing her older sister Tanasia, whom she did not see in the hall, and therefore went to look for. Here, even the prince became embarrassed upon hearing the girl's last name. Embarrassed, he noticed that she could have overheard the conversation and could have misinterpreted it, so he wanted to explain himself first. But the girl replied that she did not want to disturb His Highness with such a thing, because she was no longer at the age to play games. You heard that too, Roel realized with regret. You heard very well about how you didn't want to revolve around her, Noxia answered. So much so that even Tanasia was shocked by the tone in which her sister said it. But the girl no longer listened to anyone, and grabbing her sister by the hand added that it was time for them to go if the prince did not object. Happy birthday, Your Highness, she said to Roel as she said goodbye. The crown prince remained looking thoughtfully after the departing girl. Tanasia, being led away by her sister, looked at the prince in fear, thinking that this was a disaster, because she wanted to bring them together and root for them from the sidelines. But now it is useless, and her plans are not destined to come true. Noxia led her sister by the hand through the dark corridors of the palace, not slowing down at all. She said indignantly that she would never have thought that the crown prince could say such things. But then she turned to her sister and asked if she was okay. Tanasia didn't understand what she was talking about. And then Noxia explained that a little earlier, in the banquet hall, some people came up to say nasty things about her. And although she warned them, she was worried that they were still talking to her. And so Tanasia became so angry that she broke the glass and left. Now the girl understood why her sister had reacted that way to Roel's words, and she was grateful for the concern, but still more scared than offended. She can't let their relationship fall apart because of her. Noxia, it seems we have got it all wrong, Tanasia said, laughing sheepishly. She doesn't know if her sister heard, but the prince is worried about plans for the distant future. Harmony must be maintained between the ruling family and the nobles, so that the empire can become stronger. But even so, it is impossible to please everyone. He looked at us unfavorably. That cannot be changed, Noxia answered. But her sister tried to say that she should not judge him by such small details. His Highness is a man with great ambitions. He is a genius who has been practicing fencing since he was 5 years old, a strategist who has never lost a verbal battle. And that's not all. His eyes are perfect. His lips are like rose petals. Even just making eye contact with the ladies of the capital is enough for them to immediately fall in love with him. Such an ideal person could not have been born without great ambitions. Tanasia laughed. Askan, who was standing nearby, listened to all this without any particular emotion, his eyes betraying everything he was thinking. Noxia didn't understand everything the way Tanasia wanted, and blushing called her sister. Does she really like His Majesty that much, the girl asked, shocking Tanasia. The girl, confused, shouted out that everything was wrong and simply asked her sister not to try to avoid him, but to first listen to what he wanted to say. Noxia loved her sister very much, so without thinking, she agreed with her words, and Tanasia summed up that it would be better this way. And now they should hurry. But their conversation was interrupted by a girl who was looking for Lady Brayloff. Recognizing Miss Tiara, she asked in surprise what brought her here, to which she received the answer that she promised to show her power to control water. And a large number of people are waiting for her. At these words, Tanasia remembered what should happen next. Noxia and Roel's attachment didn't just happen. It was all the fault of the secondary villain, Leanna Krisha. She wanted to humiliate Noxia and shot a firecracker during her performance. Noxia was frightened by the sudden sound and splashed water in all directions. The one who stopped the stream of water from falling on her was Roel. Tanasia had planned to watch this romantic scene from afar, but if it happened now, it would deviate even more from the original. And then the girl suggested to her sister to first talk to the prince and then go to the banquet hall, but Noxia doubted, because people were already waiting. Lady Tiara asked if they were talking about His Highness, since he would still return to the hall, and that was where they would meet. Therefore, the younger sister reassured the older one, noting that she would talk to him in the hall. Tanasia still tried to object, but realized that it was useless, and told her younger sister to go. She would soon catch up with her. Without wasting a minute, Noxia turned around and headed into the hall, saying that they would see each other soon. After watching her sister leave, Tanasia called out to Askana in a commanding voice. She ordered him to quickly find Lady Krisha in the hall and tell her that she wanted to see her. He and Liana were united by their hatred of Noxia, and they quickly became friends on this basis. She's probably already preparing to use the firecracker, waiting for the moment to give the signal to her servant. Therefore, it was necessary to distract attention and gain some time, for which she asked Askan to try to keep Liana in one place so that she would not go anywhere. The servant turned around without a word to carry out his mistress's order. But Tanasia stopped him, pulling at his clothes. "Please try." The girl's voice sounded like a sincere request. Askin was surprised to hear that the lady was asking him, rather than ordering him. In turn, the young man promised to do everything possible. When the servant left, Tanasia decided that she now needed to find Roel and force him to talk to Noxia. She hopes with all her heart that everything will go according to plan and be good. However, reality turned out to be not what she imagined. Those around her, and even Tanasia herself, were shocked by what actually happened. Everything never goes according to plan. Noxia and Roel did indeed meet during her performance, but the circumstances of their meeting and the consequences left much to be desired. Shortly before the events, the girl was looking for her sister, Noxia, from the novel showed her power somewhere here, and the prince should be nearby. After looking around the entire hall, Tanasia saw the crown prince at the other end of it and wondered why he was there. As she expected, the plot of the novel began to change. But it was time to act, and Tanasia approached His Highness directly, introducing herself as Tanasia, the eldest daughter of the Brailovs. Roel, although surprised, asked what the girl needed, and she replied that there had recently been a misunderstanding between them, and she would like to discuss it. Roel didn't expect that he would have a chance to explain himself, so he considered this a great success. The girl reminded that she was in the garden with her younger sister, and therefore it would be better for all three of them to talk. In the middle of the banquet hall, Noxia showed off her power by creating magic from water. Tanasia and Roel were just approaching the center of events, and the girl was very glad that they were not late. Looking around the room, she noticed that Askin seemed to have managed to take Lyanna away, so Noxia wouldn't be disgraced. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that the prince was impressed by Noxia's abilities, and hoped that this would smooth over the incident in the garden. But the next moment, something unusual caught her attention. A little further away, in the crowd of people, stood an inconspicuous-looking man taking some bright thing out of his pocket. She immediately recognized him. It was Lyanna's servant who was waiting for her signal. But why did he take out a clapperboard when his mistress was not in the hall? Deciding to act faster, Tanasia turned to His Highness, noticing that her sister had promised to show everyone her powers, and suggested that they come closer, to which the prince replied that they could wait a little, and that he was also interested in it. In fact, the girl had a bad feeling and decided it was better to stand closer just in case. Watching Lyanna's servant, she noticed with horror that he was following a pre-planned plan. But why is he going to fire a firecracker when Lyanna is not here? The girl wondered. Roel was still too far away from Noxia, so Tanasia suggested that the prince stand right in front of her so that he could see better. They must get as close as possible so that he can cover her from the flow of water. The situation became more and more tense, and now Lyanna's servant pulled the firecracker by the rope. Tanasia tensed up, waiting for what would happen next. The next moment, there was a loud bang, followed by Noxia's frightened scream. Tanasia realized that everything was starting to go wrong, and if she didn't do anything, things would go badly. The next moment, the girl's hand involuntarily pushed the prince in the back. The prince, not expecting a blow from the girl, leaned forward, not understanding what was happening. And now the crown prince of the empire is standing wet in the middle of the banquet hall at his own birthday party. Tanasia could hardly say anything. She was literally speechless from everything that was happening. It was all over. She was so nervous that her hands moved by themselves. "Ha, lady." The prince's tone didn't give away what he was feeling, but the way he smoothed his water-soaked hair spoke volumes. "You wouldn't say it was an accident, would you?" The prince seemed clearly displeased. The girl tried to apologize, justifying herself by saying that she was scared by a loud sound and accidentally pushed him. Even 10 mouths wouldn't be enough to apologize to him, so she held out her handkerchief. Roel snatched the handkerchief angrily. Did she really expect him to believe this? Noxia, who had become the unwitting culprit of the incident, was offended that His Highness spoke as if everything had happened intentionally. But Prince Roel couldn't believe that the girls were going to deny it. In his opinion, it was quite obvious, the push in the back, the throw of water, everything was clearly planned. The twins' collaboration is impressive, the prince noted. But Noxia believed that words without evidence were slander, although the prince insisted that the victim was right in front of them and what other evidence was needed. "Wait a second, you might have misunderstood." Tanasia tried to interrupt their argument. But, showing surprising agreement with each other, Roel and Noxia emotionally asked Tanasia not to interfere in their conversation. The girl was stunned by this reaction, instantly losing her power of speech. She tried to make their first meeting a success, but she completely failed. By the way, where is Askan? Leanna is also not in the hall, so why use a clapperboard then? She approached one of the servants in the banquet hall and asked if he had seen her servant and Lady Krisha, but no one had seen them. Then Tanasia wondered what was going on here. There were some incidents near the banquet hall, the girl asked. And then the servant replied that he heard some commotion in the corridor. In a dark, unlit corridor in a distant corner, Askan stood propping up the door of one of the rooms. He had waited long enough, but an order was an order, even if it sounded like a request. Finally, Lady Tanasia came up to him in a hurry. The girl asked what he was doing there, but the servant did not have time to answer. "Why don't you open it? I won't let this go so easily if you don't open it!" An indignant female scream was heard from behind the door that Askan was propping up. "Is Lady Krisha really there?" Tanasia asked in a whisper and received an affirmative answer. "You locked her," she asked the next question, and Askan couldn't find what to answer. The man slowly extended his hand to the girl to say something. In the same whisper as she, he replied that the lady had asked to detain her at any cost. Still continuing to whisper so that they wouldn't be heard, Tanasia asked how he had lured her. To which Askan replied that he said that Lady Tanasia was waiting inside and then stood and guarded the door. The girl wondered what he had been doing all this time, but the servant replied that he had been ordered to detain him, and the time was not specified. But he would hardly be able to cope with the consequences, so he waited for the lady to arrive. As if to confirm his words, a furious female scream was heard from behind the door again. Askan assumed that it was a mistake and he had misunderstood. But Tanasia noticed with a smile that everything was correct. She was only surprised at how accurately he followed her orders. The lady's words sounded like praise, and Askan was a little embarrassed, noticing that this was the first time he had been asked about such a thing. Tanasia opened her eyes wide, surprised by the servant's reaction, but at that moment something hit the locked door with incredible force, and she realized that Lady Krisha had started throwing things. It was impossible to put it off any longer. She knocked gently on the door, letting Liana know it was her. Liana Krisha asked in surprise if it was really Tanasia. The girl confirmed and said that she would come by, so she asked her friend to calm down a bit. The door to the room creaked open and Tanasia appeared on the threshold along with her servant. Liana Krisha stood in the middle of the room, where broken dishes were already scattered, holding a heavy candlestick in her hands. Askan looked at everything that was happening emotionlessly, and the girl was very indignant. "How dare you lock me up?" The eyes of Liana Krisha, the villain of the novel, were blazing with rage. Tanasia asked her friend to slow down a little, and not to blame her servant since it was she who asked him. She wanted to surprise her friend a little, but had to stay late in the banquet hall. "Don't talk nonsense," Liana interrupted her, not wanting to believe what was happening. After all, Tanasia knew what she was preparing for today. Did she really want her to believe such an excuse? Liana Krisha was still holding the heavy candlestick in her hands, as if she was about to attack. But Tanasia, smiling, apologized to her again and told her not to worry, the fireworks were a success. However, she also has one question that worries her. Why was the clapperboard used without Liana's own signal? To which she replied that she asked to launch it on time, even if there was no signal, just in case. Tanasia had mixed emotions, but tried not to show them and communicate with her friend as usual. She asked if she felt stuffy there and suggested that they go into the hall together, but Liana wanted to stay and straighten her dress. "Okay then, see you later," Tanasia replied and left the room. Left alone, Liana clenched her teeth from the anger that gripped her. Raising her hand, palm up, she created a small vortex of air, pleased that her power had finally appeared. She is not as good at it as Noxia, which is why no one noticed her. Even Krish's family, they weren't interested in the illegitimate child's abilities due to the comparison with Noxia. If it weren't for her, that capable upstart Brailoff, the family would have recognized her. Having lifted the ill-fated candlestick into the air with the help of her magical power, the girl played with it a little. She thought hard about everything that had happened, realizing that everything looked extremely strange. Tanasia hated Noxia more than she did. After all, it was probably because of blood ties. Not fully realizing her strength, she used the air vortex to forcefully release the candlestick, and the heavy metal thing fell to the floor with a crash, breaking into several pieces. "Tanasia Brailoff, you will pay for deceiving me." The girl's words sounded like a serious promise. The ball in honor of the prince's birthday ended, and ordinary, unremarkable days dragged on. After that incident, Tanasia finally realized one thing: Human relationships are so complex and subtly thought out that the slightest deviation can completely change their direction. Because she acted differently than in the original story, Noxia followed her outside, and Roel ended up far away from the scene. And even Liana behaved differently than in the original, having thought of everything just in case. She doesn't even hide the fact that she doesn't trust her, but that was expected. Indeed, there are too many variables to trust people. Something more reliable is needed to prevent a war with the Kahlua Empire. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by the maid, who said that a tutor had come to see her. Although she was tired today and would like to rest a little, she still asked to invite a teacher. But the first thing to roll into the girl's room was a cart, creaking with its small wheels. "Hello, lady," Metella greeted enthusiastically, pushing a cart filled with a large number of books. Tanasia was surprised at what it was, and the teacher explained that these were materials that would help her decide on her choice of profession. The Duke asked for help with this for his daughter and provided Metella with financial support. But perhaps one day would not be enough for this. If they did not have time, they would continue in the next lesson. Having heard all this, Tanasia realized that she would be left without rest. For several hours while the lesson lasted, they actively studied and discussed books. Putting down one of the books, the teacher asked if anything interested the lady. Tanasia wasn't sure. It seemed like nothing particularly attracted her, to which Metella noted with disappointment that she had shown her almost all the materials she had brought. But the girl's gaze fell on one of the books that she had not yet studied. The book turned out to be on theory in the field of magical engineering. Tanasia took it in her hands with interest, leafing through page after page. To her surprise, she couldn't tear herself away from it. Although Metella thought that this lady would not be suitable, she decided to exclude her from the recommendations. Magic engineering includes weapons development, preparation for wars, strengthening military power, and the like. It is a field that deals with the development of weapons for warfare. But Tanasia had already decided everything and said that she would stop there. The teacher did not understand what the student was talking about, and Tanasia confidently announced that she would now study magical engineering because she finally had hope for her salvation. As long as Askin is in the Breel family, the Kahlua Empire's experiments in creating weapons from humans are unlikely to succeed. But if somehow everything goes well, then the Kahlua Empire will start a war, by which time it will create weapons to defend itself and with its own hands. Metella tried to argue that magical engineering was a rather unpopular field, so she couldn't recommend it as a subject to study. But Tanasia replied that it was okay even if it was not popular. She wanted to explore this area. She wanted to start training right away, to which the teacher said that it would be difficult to do so, since it would be necessary to invite a specialist in magical engineering. The inspired girl begged the teacher to invite the best teacher. While Tanasia was quietly studying in her home, something was happening on the streets of the city. Two men in nondescript clothes were holding a young homeless guy by the hair and examining his face. It looks like it wasn't him. He's not in this area either. The homeless man was rudely let go. 13th, this little rat. The men were clearly dissatisfied and headed further down the street. Tendai and Andro, mercenaries of the Kahlua Empire, wondered where he could have gone. By the time he managed to slip away from them, it was clear that he was not simple, but they did not expect that there would be no trace left of him. When the 13th escaped that time, he killed dozens of their comrades, so as soon as they find him, they'll kick his ass. In a fit of emotion, one of the men kicked a rock lying on the road hard, and the other told him to keep his emotions to himself. From what they say from above, the abilities that the 13th showed that time were amazing. If they catch him again, they will be able to speed up the experiments. "What difference does it make how strong his abilities are?" asked the emotional one. Opening the hem of his cloak, he showed the items hidden there. With this, he would be completely helpless. This must be the tranquilizer that was rumored to prevent subjects from using their powers. In any case, they only need to keep him alive. Even if there is no arm or leg, it will not interfere with the experiments. The second man agreed to let him do whatever he wanted and told him to get ready. The signal would be given soon. After some time, the sounds of fireworks were heard on the other side of the city, and the men noted that it was a white fireworks apparently, and their partners did not find it. But they hoped that they would not have to go all the way to the capital. It would be difficult to look for it there. The second one replied that no matter where he was hiding, it might take a little longer, but eventually they would find him. The emotional man asked if he knew why the 13th ran away. If they knew the reason, they could use it as a guide when searching. But how could they know what the subject was thinking? Apparently, he just didn't like it there. On a bright, sunny day, Askan was cleaning the garden, sweeping up plant debris. The servant was distracted from his monotonous work by a quiet female voice calling him by name, and Askan turned around. One of the maids stood in front of him and asked him to look after her child. She had a lot of things to do today, and this little one, without even asking, chased after her. The little child hid behind his mother, staring with his big eyes at Askan. The young man also looked at the child, but rather a little sadly, remembering what had broken his heart. "Brother, brother, little brother." A child's voice desperately calling him, and children's hands clinging to his clothes, surfaced in his memory. These involuntary memories made Askan feel very unhappy. He was still in the laboratory, spent a long time in solitary confinement. After the successful results of the experiment, he was transferred to a separate room. It was only after several years of living in isolation that he began to share a room with children who showed similar results. At first, he didn't care who was there besides him, but the children could not leave him alone, periodically touching his clothes. Feeling that someone had touched him, Askan was forced to look at that person. "Brother, I am number 1890th, and you are number 13th. "How long have you been here?" asked the younger boy to Askan. At that moment, his name was 13, according to the ordinal number embroidered on his clothes, and he did not answer. Another girl, also in this cell, noticed that the 13th was here before her, which surprised the boy because this means that he has been living here for a very long time. But then why doesn't he say anything? The girl replied that she had never even heard his voice. She tried to talk to him, but he did not answer. Another girl, a little younger, joined the conversation, who also had never heard the voice of the 13th. All three children stared at the young man. Even though the 13th didn't say anything, the children still became friends with him, especially the girls, who happily braided his long hair. While the girls were doing his hair, happy with such entertainment, the boy offered to fight him. Despite his indifference, the children approached him with curiosity. And then, Askan could not resist for long, giving in to the childish pressure. Having felt human warmth for the first time, he gradually began to open up to them. "Brother, how did you end up here?" the boy asked, to which the 13th replied that he was a child, and therefore did not remember. The same thing happened to 1890, and he also doesn't remember. The older girl answered that she was told that they were giving her food and housing, so she came herself. But the girl numbered 1743 said with a smile that her mother had sent her here, and that she had promised to return when everything was better for her. The younger children were excited to hear that it would be great, and that they all wanted to get away from here, but the 13th one knew that it wasn't that simple. Most of the children in the lab were like that. They were either orphans or sold by their own parents. Unfortunately, the children had a poor understanding of their situation. And looking at them, the 13th remembered his childhood, which made his heart clench. "Brother, do you have a name?" the children asked, and wanted to come up with a name for him themselves. 13 wanted to protect these children, but he was powerless to do anything. As the experiments progressed, each child became worse, and the eldest girl began to bleed again. Because of the side effects of the experiments, many of the children were at great risk, and the 13th was very worried about them but could not do anything. All he could do was hug them and reassure them that everything would be fine, that it would soon pass. 1691 came a shout from outside their cage. It was the girls' turn to go to the lab for experiments, but the 13th really wanted to protect them all, although it was not easy, so he did not want to let her go to the lab. The scientist began to get angry, asking what he was doing, and he demanded that the 1691st be released, but after the 13th did not obey, he forcibly dragged the girl away. She resisted and screamed that she didn't want to and wouldn't go, making Askan's heart clench with every scream. She said she didn't want to go. The young man grabbed the girl by the hand and said, looking straight into the scientist's eyes, he didn't like such impudence, and he decided to teach him a lesson. Outraged that he was talking about friendship here, the scientist decided to act differently. The man swung his arm to force them to obey. But at that moment, the girl began to cough violently, and blood appeared around her mouth again. Without hitting anyone, the scientist lowered his hand in disappointment. "She's useless in this state," the man said. In that case, since the girl is so dear to the 13th, it means that they will conduct the experiment on him, and then she will be freed. The same will happen with the other subjects. He made this offer to the 13th. He didn't think long, and for the good of the children, he agreed to sacrifice himself. After undergoing dozens of experiments in a row, his body was changing rapidly. However, at the same time, overexertion arose, and one day, having lost consciousness, he could not come to his senses for several days. Then it all happened. When the 13th was returned to the cell, there was no one in it. Askan froze on the threshold, but he was persistently forced to go inside. The door closed behind him, and the young man asked in confusion where the children were, and his eyes widened in horror when he heard that children were being experimented on. But they said that if he passed the experiments, they would be released, to which the scientist retorted that this was when he was fine, but he lay unconscious for several days. The 13th was only interested in whether the children were safe, to which he again received a vague answer. But if he is so interested, he can ask the remaining test subject, the scientist replied, glancing at the pile of bloody rags in the corner of the chamber. The 13th turned in that direction in horror, not immediately realizing that there was someone alive there. 1,890, what are you doing here? Askan carefully lifted the barely alive child. The boy barely audibly said that he was cold, so much so that the 13th was horrified by how much blood he had lost. Brother, I saw, tears appeared on the boy's pale face. He saw the rest of the children being taken away on a cart, no longer alive. Askan's eyes widened in horror as he realized that they were all already dead. Me too. Will I really die? The last crumb of life was leaving in 1,890. The boy said with all his might that he was scared and didn't want to die, but the 13th couldn't help him in any way. Someone give me some painkillers or at least a sedative. His cry seemed to come from a bottomless well of despair, and no one heard it. 1,890 became icy in his embrace. Even after there were no more children, he had to continue to undergo harsh experiments. The laboratory did not allow him to live or die, it only brought him terrible suffering. Askan had nothing left to lose, so he decided to escape from there. Ironically, it was turning into a weapon that helped him get out. But even after escaping, he didn't gain freedom. Some people sold him into slavery while he was unconscious, and the man who became his master intended to continue the experiment of turning people into weapons. Outside was not much better than in the laboratory. And now, as if none of that had happened in the past, Askan was looking after the servant's child. The baby saw a red, ripe apple on the tree and showed it to Askana with interest. Then the young man lifted the baby up so that he could pick it. Although Askan did not show any emotion outwardly, a storm was raging inside him. Why, that evening under the starry sky, Lady Tanasia was literally glowing. No, has something really changed in her? That's impossible. These thoughts did not give him peace, making him nervous from the uncertainty of his future fate. What was this lady thinking about? Tanasia spent all her free time reading books, so she read the entire series of Varnon's Magical Engineering, and she became interested in whether there were other similar books on sale. After reading Magic Engineering for a few days, Tanasia had learned that in this world where magic exists, there are many more types of weapons than in the modern world. Weapons can be roughly divided into two types, one of which is conventional weapons created using standard engineering technologies, and the second type of weapon made with the help of magical engineering, endowed with magical power. Magic weapons gain their unique power depending on the choice of magic stone used in their manufacture. For example, if you make a sword with a water magic stone, it will be able to use water attribute magic. The power of a weapon varies greatly depending on the magic stone, and the stones themselves have limited power. However, magic weapons have much greater destructive power than normal weapons due to the use of magic power itself. Since the presence or absence of magical power initially determines the difference in power, the national power of countries directly depends on the number of magicians and magical weapons at their disposal. The problem is that the Arwen Empire currently has neither magicians nor magical weapons that can lead to victory in the war. Askan gained the magical power of fire artificially during an experiment to turn people into weapons. He has the ability to control unquenchable fire, making his power ideal for warfare. If Askan returns to the Kahlua Empire, no one in the Arwen Empire will be able to stop him. Of course, if she stays with him, such a future will not happen, but who knows how long he will be around. So Tanasia needs to create weapons to prepare for the worst-case scenario. While studying some notes, the girl began to think about magic stones. Magic engineering requires magic stones, but their price is too high to supply all soldiers with them. Despite the power of weapons, they cannot be used everywhere, so magic engineering has become an unpopular field of knowledge. That's why the Kahlua Empire decided to create a weapon from a human. Maybe collect magic stones and create a weapon as powerful as a nuclear bomb, the girl thought. Or create a simpler weapon that ordinary soldiers can use. Tanasia thought deeply. A nuclear bomb, like a normal weapon, would require too many stones. Isn't there anything that could replace the magic stones? Came from very close by, the girl who was so deep in thought that she didn't notice the teacher entering the room. Raising her head, she was surprised to see that Teacher Metella had already arrived, to which she asked what she was thinking about so much that she hadn't even noticed her arrival. But as soon as she heard the student's answer, Metella took out a small box and said, pleased that she had brought what she had asked for last time. Inside the small box lay a thin silver bracelet made of a magic stone. The girl asked with interest what abilities he gave, and Metella said that it would be better to ask the one who created it. At that moment, the door to the room opened and an older man appeared on the threshold. Metella respectfully invited him to pass, and Tanasia looked with interest to see who it was. The lady, as I promised, brought you a teacher of magical engineering, a very famous person, Metella introduced the stranger. And his name is Varnin Adtenando. The lady literally opened her mouth in surprise. Varnin, that's the author who wrote the Varnin Magic Engineering series of books, the very one she just read. Yes, the stranger answered, and he didn't sound very friendly. He wrote this book, added Varnin Adtenando, a specialist in magical engineering. Tanasia was so shocked that she covered her mouth with her hand in amazement. It felt like she had met a star. It's a great honor for me. I recently read all your books. They helped me a lot. The girl jumped up from her seat and began chattering very quickly. She also remembered that she had forgotten to introduce herself and wanted to say her name, but the teacher interrupted, noting that he knew that she was the eldest daughter of the Marquis of Brelov, Tanasia Brelova. But if he had not been in debt to the Marquis in the past, he would not have been dragged here. Tanasia was slightly surprised and discouraged by the teacher's last words. Without wasting any time, Varnin continued that Metella had mentioned that she was talented, however. Studying was just a noble lady's hobby. Unfortunately, he was not inclined to participate in such games. Today he came to refuse her personally, and it would be better for the lady to tell her father that she wants to study another subject. But Metella was indignant at this time, because he had already agreed to teach, so he can say the opposite. After asking them to wait a minute, Tanasia took from the stack the very book she had just read. Having found the right page, she continued that if she ever had the chance to meet the teacher again, she would have many questions that she would want to ask him. For example, here, the girl pointed to the page, she doesn't understand why he explains it this way. Not expecting any questions, Varnin stared in surprise at the book the girl was showing him, and noticing that the girl was pointing to a specific line, he replied that it was an advanced piece of magical engineering, so it was difficult to understand. But why does Tanasia care about this? He doesn't think the noble lady really needs to know this. Here, Lady Brelova was surprised by his words. She did not understand how this could be connected at all. Her origins and the study of magical engineering are two completely different things. And she takes it seriously enough to understand all the intricacies. Varnin was truly impressed by the girl's words because he considered her just another noblewoman. And turning to Metella, he assumed that she had not lied to him when she said that the lady wanted to study magical engineering, although he thought that she was simply trying to fool his naive nature. Varnin walked with a firm step towards the table standing in the room and called the girl to follow him. He said he would explain everything just once so that she would listen carefully. Tanasia was very happy about this, because it meant that the teacher would take her on as a student, but Metella was the most delighted. But before Tanasia had time to sit down at the table, a maid entered the room with the message that Lady Krisha had arrived. The girl was surprised why Leanna would come, but the maid reminded her that today was the day of important monthly meetings and asked what to do. It seems that Tanasia and Leanna used to have similar meetings. Well, in public they are friends. Tell Leanna to wait a bit in my room. I will come as soon as my lesson is over. Ask her for understanding, she said to the maid. Immediately after the library, Jaren returned to the mistress's room, where the guest was waiting. The maid conveyed these words of the lady to the guest, but Leanna was not very happy about it. The girl apologized again that the lady had suddenly started classes. Then Leanna ordered tea to be brought to her. She thought that it would be advantageous to stay close to Tanasia for now, so she came to every meeting. But now that this bitch was going to demonstratively ignore her just because she was the daughter of a maid, Leanna's anger grew stronger, At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and the girl had to turn towards it. "Lady, it's me!" A male voice came from behind the door, and Leanna Krisha immediately recognized him. She simply couldn't help but recognize him. He was so deeply imprinted in her memory. She opened the door in a hurry, and indeed, right in front of her stood Tanasia's servant, Askan. The young man did not expect to see Lady Leanna in Lady Tanasia's room, and therefore was very surprised. "Hello, here we meet again." The guest's voice sounded ominous, not boding well. The next moment, a tenacious hand with long nails reached out to the young man. "Judging by your face, you're also new to seeing me." Leanna grabbed him by the shirt, not letting him leave. Askan seemed to understand that he really couldn't get away now and that he was in trouble. "I remember the last time Tanasia came to her. She injured one of the maids," the girl said ingratiatingly. "Wouldn't it be fair if she did the same to at least one of her people? It just so happens that I enjoy ruining the faces of pretty servants like you with tears." A smirk appeared on Leanna's lips. The girl wondered how she could disfigure Askana, looking into his frightened eyes. In the library, Tanasia had been listening to Teacher Varnon's explanations for a long time. Now, after his explanations, everything became clear. The girl thought with surprise. The lesson continued, and for the next explanation, they would need paper. So the man asked if he could take the notebook lying on the table. When Tanasia gave permission, he took the notebook and one sheet slipped out of it. By inertia, the teacher took this sheet and looked at it, and the girl mentally gasped in fear. But Varnon had no intention of putting this piece of paper aside, and even became interested in what was on it. "You drew this?" he asked Tanasia thoughtfully. And while Tanasia explained that she did it to pass the time, imagining what it would be like to have such a weapon, the teacher couldn't tear himself away from this sketch. "Try to explain what you imagined." The man finally tore himself away from the sheet of paper and put it on the table. Tanasia was a little surprised by such a request, but began to explain that when you press the trigger, a magic ball is fired. Varnon began asking additional questions. What kind of magic ball is this? How does it work? Will the power be small for such a small weapon? To which Tanasia replied that small magic balls spin, increasing their power. The attribute of the ball does not matter. The main thing is that it can cause a big explosion. Then Varnon took up his pen and added something to the sketch, asking if this was what she meant. Tanasia looked at the corrections and said that she herself had not thought of this. "The teacher is really amazing. The one who came up with such a design calls me amazing." The man was dumbfounded, but the girl replied that she had not thought about such practical details, to which the teacher remarked that this could be learned. She was just starting out, so she should not jump so far. It took him decades to do so. Then Varnon fell silent and looked at the girl for a long time and very carefully, and then said that he would take Lady Tanasia as a student. The girl couldn't believe what he said and even asked again if it was true. Initially, the teacher really didn't come here of his own free will, but frankly speaking, he was interested. "I didn't think that you would be interested in me, teacher." Tanasia became proud, but her self-esteem dropped a little when the man corrected her that he was interested not in her, but in the drawing. Realizing that she had said something stupid, the girl became a little gloomy, and the teacher wanted to see things through to the end. If they succeeded, they would be able to obtain a weapon of terrifying power. The girl really liked this job prospect and happily agreed to it. At this time, the teacher asked Matella if she had bought the magical engineering bracelet he had created, to which the woman was very surprised. How did he know about it? He retorted that how could he not know when such an expensive thing was bought, and demanded that she give it to him. When Matella tried to object that this bracelet belonged to a lady, he explained that he would give his student a task. He asked if Tanasia knew what power this bracelet had, but she didn't know, and he considered it a disgrace to his name, giving her the task for the next lesson to try to figure out on her own the power and method of using this bracelet. Tanasia agreed, but had no idea where to start, and after finishing the lesson she went to her room, looking at the bracelet on her hand. There was a maid standing right in front of the door of the room, and she looked very frightened. "What happened?" she asked the girl, and she babbled something very frightened. At that moment, a very loud and dull knock was heard inside the room, so loud that Tanasia fell into a stupor. She had absolutely no idea what was going on there, but the whole situation made her very worried. As if bewitched, she headed to her room, ignoring the maid's attempts to stop her. With bated breath, I opened the door to my room to see what was going on there. At first, her gaze caught on Askan lying on the floor, his body covered in blood. "Oh, Tanasia!" A slightly surprised female voice rang out. Liana stood over the bloody Askan, holding an equally bloody bat in her hands. This whole spectacle left Tanasia so shocked that she could not move. Then Liana waved the bat, invited the girl to come closer to her, to see what gift she'd brought her. But somehow it turned out that first she used it herself. It was made to order. They say that if you hit with it, the pain will go to the very bones. It's funny that even the sound is so pleasant. Askan tried to get up with these words, and Liana, noticing this, swung at him again, inviting Tanasia to listen to this amazing sound. The servant, it seemed, had already resigned himself to his fate, and only glanced briefly at his tormentor. A heavy wooden bat fell on the man's back, but the sound was not muffled as before, but ringing, as if it had struck metal, from which Lady Krisha was very surprised. What was it just now, she tried to ask her friend. But Tanasia didn't stand on ceremony with her. She swung her arm in an instant and gave her guest a hearty slap in the face, thus surprising everyone around him, including his servant Askan. The ill-fated bat fell out of her hands, and the girl herself fell to the floor in surprise. Liana was outraged by Tanasia's actions, but it was not over yet. Tanasia picked up the fallen bloody object and grabbed it tightly with her hands. The next second, she swung with all her might at the girl lying on the floor. She screamed in fear and tried to cover herself with her hand from the blow, but Tanasia only exhaled loudly without doing what she had planned. To bring something like that as a gift, the girl's voice sounded muffled and her hand dropped the hated object. It turns out that Liana is more base than Tanasia thought. This characterization of her from Tanasia greatly outraged Liana, and she recalled how she was the first to attack a servant in the Krish estate. But Lady Brelov retorted that no matter what had happened in the past, she would not do that anymore. And now he warns her that if he touches her people even once more, she won't get off so easily. Askan listened and watched with bated breath to everything that was happening in the room. Liana tried to put on a brave face and asked what Tanasia could do to her. Would she really try to destroy her in high circles? You think that this is the only thing I am capable of? Try to use your imagination. I am the eldest daughter of Marquis Brelov, and I will crush you with all the means available to me. Tanasia spoke with all possible seriousness and gloom. Realizing that she was not joking, Liana still tried to somehow cheer herself up, but her hands were already starting to tremble. Even though she is the daughter of a servant, how dare she treat her like that? Do they really consider her worse than this slave? But Tanasia didn't care, and Lady Krisha could think whatever she wanted. The main thing was that she warned her. Realizing that Tanasia was speaking quite seriously and not joking at all, Liana became frightened. But pulling herself together, she lifted her skirt and stood up. Tanasia Brelov, you will still bitterly regret today trying to regain your dignity, said Liana Krisha. But this scared Tanasia, and all she answered was that she couldn't wait. Slamming the door in a fit of anger, Liana left Tanasia's room, leaving her to ponder what had happened. Tanasia was very angry, but still remembered everything that happened here. Askan, are you okay? How serious is this? She rushed to her servant. And then she ordered Jareen to quickly call a doctor, which the maid did. And while the girl was helping Askan to get up, at the same time the servant asked why she did this. Stopping, Tanasia looked at him in surprise and asked again what he said. Why did you do this because of me? He raised his eyes to the lady and repeated the question. Looking at his sad expression, like that of a little beaten kitten, Tanasia thought. But she didn't have to think for long because the guy staggered and sank to the floor like a doll. Askan, wake up! Tanasia immediately rushed to him, trying to bring him to his senses. He ran barefoot again through the dark, dense forest. He ran with all his might, unable to catch his breath, because then they would catch up. Again this dream, again his pursuers catch up with him. It was hard for him, and the boy already understood that he couldn't escape from them. The pursuers also understood this, and therefore pursued with a malicious smile. The legs ran slower and slower, eventually intending to stop. He stopped, thinking that he would soon be caught, and indeed, tenacious hands grabbed him by the clothes and pulled him somewhere. But to Askan's surprise, it was not his pursuers, but Lady Tanasia Brelov, who gestured to him to remain silent. Freeze, his beautiful savior said quietly, smiling slightly. Askan's eyes widened in surprise and the glimmer of hope for salvation. The next moment the young man opened his eyes from oblivion, and I realized that I was lying in a clean bed with a wet bandage on my head. He took the wet towel off his forehead in surprise and looked at it. I woke up and heard the quiet sound of a book closing very close by. It was Tanasia who was interested in how Askana was feeling. Seeing the lady next to him, the young man blushed slightly, still remembering the dream he had. Askan replied that everything was fine, but he did not remember what happened. Then Tanasia reminded him that he lost consciousness and fell, and she herself was very scared. "That's right, Lady Krisha beat him," the young man remembered. The way the heavy wooden bat came down on his back with such force is unforgettable. Finally, he reflexively tensed his body. Askan touched his back, still aching from his wounds. And he thought with regret that it looked like he would have to leave this place earlier than planned. If others found out about this, they would find him. But Askan's thoughts were interrupted by a hand falling on his forehead. Shaking with surprise, he asked in fear what she was doing, but Tanasia just wanted to check if he had a fever, so she asked him to calm down. At that very moment, he actually calmed down, only blushing even more from her touch. "Thank God it looks like the fever has gone down," Tanasia noted, comparing his forehead with her own. "Then please remove your hand. I feel uncomfortable," the servant said, blushing even more. The girl seemed to be stunned by this seemingly ordinary request of his. She looked with wide eyes at the young man lying in bed and noticed that his face had turned red. But for some reason, Tanasia really wanted to make fun of him, and she noted that it was not worth leaving him in a sweat, as his temperature might rise again. The next moment, the girl's gentle hands began to unbutton the shirt of the servant, who was surprised by this turn of events. When she quickly dealt with the second button, exposing his chest, Askan became scared. Grabbing Tanasia's hand, he asked her to stop and promised to deal with it himself when she left. But the girl didn't understand why, because he had changed clothes in front of her more than once. But the servant kept trying to pry the lady's hands away, saying that it was not the same. Tanasia didn't understand what was different this time. Was he really embarrassed? The girl's face also turned slightly red, and a sly smile appeared on it. "I'm not embarrassed," Askan said fearfully, but the increasingly intense redness on his face indicated otherwise. He noticed a smile on the lady's face and seemed to be even a little offended by her. Finally, Tanasia removed her hands and apologized, noting that his reaction was too funny and she was just joking, did not really intend to undress him, and asked to understand her correctly. Askan only silently listened to the lady's explanations, but his thoughts returned to recent events. "No matter what happened in the past, I don't do it anymore. So I warn you, if you touch my people even once again, you won't get off so easily." These are the words Lady Tanasia said to her friend. "Lady, why did you do this?" Askan suddenly grabbed the girl by the hand. Tanasia immediately thought that he was angry because of her unsuccessful joke. But the servant explained that he did not understand why she did this to Lady Krisha. Tanasia, in turn, was very surprised why he didn't resist. It was enough to simply dodge. Askan thought that she would get into trouble and did not resist because I had everyone thinking that Lady Krisha would find something to complain about. "Then I would immediately stand up for you," the girl answered instantly, without even a second of hesitation. She told him that he was her man, and Tanasia would not tolerate anyone hurting him. These words made the young man literally freeze in surprise, his eyes wide open. Warmth spread through his body. It was nice to be her man, he told the lady. Tanasia did not expect to hear such words from the servant, and therefore was also very surprised. But she was also pleased to hear this from him. Was it really only he who realized this? Although their conversation was very sincere, the girl noticed something that worried her. "By the way, Askan, maybe you should let go of my hand," said Tanasia, and the servant immediately let go of her hand, apologizing. The girl waved her already numb hand freely, and the bracelet on it began to sparkle and jingle. "Lady, why are you wearing that bracelet?" Askan asked in shock when she noticed it. Because of his unusual reaction, Tanasia thought that he knew something about him. Yes, that objects endowed with magical power are dangerous, and the servant asked to quickly remove it, but Tanasia refused, saying that the teacher gave her a task related to this bracelet, since she recently began to study magical engineering. He told her to figure out this bracelet. "You wear this dangerous thing without knowing anything about it!" The young man was indignant. "Oh, come on, I'm strong in theory," Tanasia tried to calm him down. Judging by the color of the magic stone, most likely the bracelet has the attribute of light. In addition, although silver was used as the material for the bracelet, it is not the most expensive material that goes well with a valuable magic stone. Silver was probably not chosen by chance. Then perhaps the lady knows that a magical engineer installs locks to prevent theft of magical items, Askan asked. Tanasia, of course, knew this, and that if the lock was handled incorrectly, the item could explode. And yet she took on this task, which worried the servant very much. But Tanasia reassured him that even if the teacher seemed eccentric to her, There were probably reasons why he gave her this task. Realizing that it was impossible to argue with the lady, Askan finally gave in. And yet, Tanasia was worried by his words. It seemed that not everything was so simple. "Askan, are you worried about me?" the girl asked. And the servant's reaction to her question only confirmed it. Tanasia really liked his reaction. It was so sweet that she even laughed, but the servant didn't like it. "You can think whatever you want," said Askan and turned away. Since he had already come to his senses, it was time for the lady to go at parting. She told him that if he felt bad, he should call her. As soon as the girl left, Askan remained alone in the room and only continued to look after her. A pleasant feeling arose in the young man's soul that he had not felt before. Her words about how she wouldn't tolerate anyone hurting him kept running through his head, and he couldn't believe how much relief those words brought him. Askan forced himself to stop thinking about it, because he would have to leave soon anyway. This made him very sad. He understood that he would have to leave after some time and very, very soon. And then he will never see Lady Tanasia again. Over time, Askan gradually recovered from his injuries. And Tanasia concentrated on the homework that the teacher gave her. "This bracelet has an owner. Or she is the first one to put a seal on it," the girl thought. For the first seal, it is enough to drop blood on this magic stone. If it has an owner, then the lock will work and an explosion will occur. No matter how eccentric the teacher was, he wouldn't give her homework that her life depended on. And the point of that homework wasn't to check the 50-50 odds. Then what does he expect from her? Based on this question, she will be able to understand what she needs to do. Judging by the color of the magic stone and the use of a material with the properties of silver, this bracelet most likely has light magic. But without a direct launch, one cannot be sure of this. Even if the answer is light magic, it would be pointless to simply assume it. It is dangerous to try to engrave a seal on a bracelet that may already belong to someone else. So what she needs to do is take apart the bracelet and check if it has an owner, and if not, she will activate it herself and be able to test it for light magic. These thoughts seemed like a plan of action, and Tanasia decided that she would do just that. A few more days passed in intense work with the bracelet. She worked so hard that she slept and ate little. Even the servants noticed her tired state. One evening, Askan was heading to his mistress's chambers when he met a maid at the door. The girl said worriedly that today the lady had not left the room either. She told her to eat, but Lady Tanasia only asks to leave the food at the door, which makes the maid very worried. Askan replied that he would try to talk to her himself. Knocking gently on the door, the young man asked if the lady would not leave the room today either, since she could not continue to skip meals. All in work, Tanasia asked to leave food in front of the door. She would eat later. But this answer did not satisfy Askan, and he decided to act more harshly. "All the food that was left at the door remains, and if you don't eat this time, I will report it to the master." The servant decided to use the last effective method on the lady, and his words really had an effect. Tanasia looked up from her work, horrified at what might happen. "Tanasia, you haven't eaten properly for several days." The head of the family's voice sounded as if it were real and didn't bode well, and she was forced to finish the work with regret, although she hoped to complete it sooner. Rising from her seat, she slowly, stretching her numb legs, headed towards the door. "Okay, your blackmail worked," she replied, opening the door to her room. "Let's go eat." A girl with huge bruises under her eyes, still in her nightgown, looked at Askana. The lady's appearance did not escape the servant's attention, and he was a little worried about her. A maid appeared behind Askan and noticed in horror that the lady might actually faint. The girl immediately turned on the light in the room and began to tidy up the lady and arrange the food, indignant that she had not left the room for so long and that something really could happen. "Hey, Jaren," Tanasia finally managed to get a word in, and the maid immediately responded. The lady asked her to leave as this chatter was already giving her indigestion. Although Jareen was slightly frightened by the lady's tone, she was glad that she nevertheless began to eat and hurried out of the room. Tanasia measuredly cut the food into pieces, intending to eat anyway. By the way, at some point she started eating with Askan, and the chef always prepared portions for two. And now her servant was sitting opposite her, also finishing his portion. The girl noticed that they hadn't had dinner like this for a long time and asked how he was doing, to which he replied that everything was fine, everything was as usual. Then she asked if he was full, and again received the answer yes, and all this reminded her of something. Tanasia didn't understand what was happening to him. Askan was always a little taciturn, but this time there was something else. Turning to him, the girl said that she still had some things to do, so she might miss a meal again, so she would arrange for something to be cooked separately for him. She will then pass this on to the chef so that Askan will remember to eat properly. Yes, I understand, the young man answered again briefly and without emotion. When they finished dinner, Askan cleared the plates from the table. But after thinking a little, he nevertheless turned to the lady with a question. Tanasia, having already returned to her work, looked up at him in surprise. It seemed that Askan did not dare to say everything he wanted at once, so he hesitated a little. But he still made up his mind and told the lady that even if she ate alone, she should take care of her nutrition. Please let her not harm herself. These words surprised Tanasia very much and made her think. But she still agreed, not understanding why he said it. But without a doubt, Askan is a bit strange today. Did something happen? The girl thought anxiously. She would have to talk to him when she finished the task. A few days later, a contented Lady Brailov set out alone into the thick of the forest. Now that she's convinced the bracelet has no owner, all that's left to do is just launch it. If you use magic anywhere, you might accidentally wake people up, so she decided to test it in a deserted place. "Who's there?" A stern voice immediately rang out from behind her, causing the girl to shudder. A male voice asked what she was doing here at such a late hour. And now, looking at him, Tanasia recognized him as Jen, the night bodyguard of Marcus Brailov. Although not widely known, Jen was one of the most skilled swordsmen in the Empire, and also one of the supporting characters in Beloved Saint. The girl decided that she needed to explain herself before he misunderstood something. Before she could do anything, the sound of footsteps was heard from the other side. Askan slowly emerged from the forest, surprising the girl, who did not expect to see him there. And she realized that Jen was not addressing her, but Askan, and none of them could see her. But what is going on? What reasons have caught them all in the forest? Jen asked the young man who he was and promised to strike if he did not answer. The young man's eyes looked calmly at the unfamiliar knight. At this time, Tanasia noticed that Askan was holding a bag in his hands, and it seemed that the girl understood what had brought her servant into the thicket of the forest in the middle of the night. "If you eat alone, take care of your nutrition," were the last words he said to her, apparently as a farewell. So that's why he was acting so strange, the girl realized. She had planned to stop Jen, but now seemed to be the best time to do what she came here for. Tanasia had pierced her finger with a needle, causing it to bleed. If it suddenly turned out that Askan was planning an escape, he would be punished for it, so she had no choice but to immediately check the bracelet. As soon as the drop of blood touched the magic stone, the forest thicket was immediately illuminated by a bright, blinding light. Everyone who was nearby at that time covered their eyes, saving them from the blinding light. Askan, like the knight, stood there confused, not understanding anything and covering his eyes. Someone grabbed his arm, which scared him a lot. "Askan, follow me." It was Lady Tanasia, and she was very excited. Leading Askan by the hand along the dark corridor of the mansion, the girl did not even slow down. Obediently following his mistress, the young man reflected on everything that had happened. The one who blocked his path had no weaknesses. If he fought him, he would certainly lose. Clutching the handle of his bag, he wondered why he had to run into such a person on such a day. But he had another chance. He should run now, break free from this hand. Such questions were spinning in Askan's head. At this time, they reached the mistress's room, and she ordered him to hide in her room. Askan could not resist and agreed to everything she said. Once inside the room, the girl closed the door behind them and breathed a sigh of relief. "Did you really want to run away?" she asked quietly, turning to the servant. He had no choice but to answer in the affirmative, and this was the pure truth. She'll probably start blaming him, unfortunately, the young man thought. She can accuse him of ingratitude, although she has been kind to him all this time. Even if she again subjects him to experiments and abuses like before, he will not be able to say anything. Whatever the case, it will be difficult to restore good relations. The young man jerked from his own thoughts. Good relations between them, he really thinks so. At this time, Tanasia was looking for something in her closets, while simultaneously saying that he had developed such a serious plan and managed to hide it without giving himself away even once. No matter how much he trusts her, it still hurts her. The girl took some jewelry out of her closets and asked the servant to give her his bag. Did he really think that with such money he could hide for a long time, to hide his identity and not get caught? He needed more. With such words, she put all her valuables in his bag. In his place, Tanasia would have cleaned out this room long ago, taking out everything valuable that was in it. "You mean I should have robbed you?" Askan asked in surprise, to which Tanasia noted that he was going to run away anyway. And how does he know that if a slave is caught escaping, his ankles are cut off? If theft is added, it won't change anything. She returned the bag full of jewelry to him. Askin, who was watching all this, asked in surprise what she had just done and received the answer she had financed his escape. "They financed it, but why, lady?" the young man wondered. Blushing slightly, Tanasia replied that she just wanted to help him. But he still didn't understand why she needed this, why she was doing all this for him. Previously, she was interested in his body, asked him to tell her how to get the same ability, and although he doesn't know everything, if she wants, he will tell her everything he knows. Shocked by his sudden impulse to be frank, the girl could not understand why he needed this. Was he still thinking about it, even though she had told him so many times that she wasn't interested? But the servant could not believe what the reasons were that she was so kind to him. He could not believe that she simply wanted to help him. Realizing that their conversation had reached a dead end, Tanasia fell silent, not knowing what else to say. With a heavy sigh, she replied that she had indeed wanted to win his trust at first, but not to find out information about his body. She simply did not want to ruin her relationship with him. But the more Tanasia treated him well, the more confused he looked. The girl confirmed her words by taking the young man by the hand. Eventually, she began to think that he was just an ordinary guy. Askan's yellow eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe what he heard. And then she concluded that the reason to treat him kindly was gone, that's all. "And that's it?" the young man asked incredulously, nevertheless taking back his bag, now filled with jewelry. The girl threw up her hands. She really had said everything. If he asked her about anything else, she would have nothing to say. In a mix of emotions, Askan clutched the strap of his bag in his hands. The young man was completely at a loss. At that moment, male voices were heard in the corridor. They were clearly looking for someone. "It seems like someone woke up," Tanasia said anxiously. She knows he wants to run away, but not today. And so she grabs his hand tighter. She promised to wait for a convenient opportunity and get him out of here. And just in case, he needs to take more food and clothes with him. Having led Askan to her closet, the girl decided to first take care of his outerwear. Taking something dark out of the closet, she assumed that it should suit him. The next moment, Tanasia threw a long, dark cloak with a hood over the shoulders of the young man standing in front of her. If he is caught with luggage, he will be suspected, so let him put this on and return to his room. The servant's face immediately turned red, and his eyes dropped to the floor from such an awkward situation. "Be careful that others don't notice you," Tanasia continued to admonish him, tying his cloak. "If he is caught, then let him say that it was she who gave him the order, and the rest can be left to her." "Are you really going to help me escape?" The guy's face became even redder, and his voice faltered. While tying her shoelace, Tanasia confirmed, otherwise, why would she do it? "But to be honest, it upsets her a little," the girl added sadly. After all, she thought that they were already improving their relationship. Askan stood straight and tried not to move, afraid to frighten away this wonderful moment between them. But at the girl's words, his eyes widened in surprise. "If it could be otherwise, I would want to stay close and protect myself, but I will not interfere with what you want," the girl said. At last the cloak was tied, and she withdrew her hands with regret. Then Tanasia instructed Askana not to go down the center, but to go to the end of the corridor and exit through the back door, suggesting to see him tomorrow. Following the lady's instructions, the young man moved slowly and without attracting attention along the corridor. But his thoughts were far from what was happening right now. She said she wanted to help him escape, and she looked so sincere at that moment. The moonlight streaming through the windows created amazing reflections on the dark fabric of the cloak. She said that the more she treated him well, the more confused he seemed, and she began to think that he was just an ordinary guy, so the reason to treat him well disappeared. The moonlight spread further and higher along the cloak, becoming stronger and brighter. She is a little upset by this situation, because she thought that they were already improving their relationship. If it could be otherwise, she would want to stay close and protect him. The moonlight reached the hood, making it shine brighter than the stars at night. The young man stopped, engulfed in the bright glow of the starry night sky mixed with moonlight. And this light so brightly illuminated his emotions at that moment that, unable to contain them, Askan covered his face with his hands. Taking his hands away from his face, he looked at them carefully, feeling a slight tingling sensation on his fingertips. It was these hands that she touched with her own, the young man realized, blushing from head to toe. There was such silence in the house that it was hard to believe that something had happened there during the night. Tanasia also pretended that she didn't know anything, but in her head, she had something completely different. Last night, she used a magic bracelet. It wasn't something that could be easily obtained in the market. No matter how much she thought, they couldn't help but guess that she was the one who used it, especially considering that it was that very night bodyguard. "Lady, the head of the family is calling you." There was a knock from behind the door and a male voice. "Speak of the devil," thought the girl, and walked to the door. When she opened it, she really saw that very night. Jen said that he would take her to the master's office. She knows that Jen is a man of few words, but she would never have thought that he would be so silent, the girl thought, following the knight through the corridors. No matter how you look at it, he is clearly the same in character as Askan. When they finally arrived at the head of the family's office, the knight knocked and announced that Lady Tanasia was here. "Let him come in," came from the depths of the office. The knight opened the door and with a frightening look invited the lady to come inside. The image of the knight was so frightening that Tanasia thought that he was much more terrible than Askan. Entering inside, the girl respectfully greeted her father. Olan Brelov invited her to sit down while he was busy with some business, and the girl noticed that her father looked very tired. "It looks like he has a lot of work. Did he really not get enough sleep because of yesterday's commotion?" Tanasia, Jen said that he saw a suspicious person last night, but missed him because someone used magic. While sorting through the papers, the father nevertheless began the conversation. The girl immediately became wary, realizing what was about to be discussed. Brelov asked if she had anything to say about this. The girl remained silent, but she understood that her father knew everything and was giving her a chance to justify herself. Keeping her composure, she confirmed that she had used light magic outside the mansion the previous night, as she knew that, if she lied unconvincingly, things would only get worse. Sir Brelov noticed that according to Metella, the magic stone bracelet had not yet been engraved with a seal. The girl replied that Teacher Varnon gave her homework, so she took the bracelet apart and entered new formulas. Yesterday, she just wanted to check if it worked. The father was very surprised, because only a little time had passed since she began studying magical engineering, to which the girl replied that this is what she chose. She is so interested that she completely immersed herself in it. The father was sincerely glad that she was interested, and did not ask any more questions about what happened that night. Tanasia was glad that everything was resolved so easily, but still asked if a suspicious person had really entered the mansion last night. Brelov replied that it seemed that there were no signs of invasion or escape. "Then perhaps someone from the mansion was mistaken for an outsider," Tanasia asked, as if she had just realized this. The man jerked in surprise because he hadn't even thought about it. Someone from the mansion could indeed have been mistaken for an outsider. Tanasia said that last night she really wanted to try magic, but she was afraid of waking people. So she went outside, and when she went out, it was too dark, so she called her servant, but did not meet him. "Maybe it's all because of this," the girl asked naively, because she understood that last night Jen saw Askan's silhouette. He probably realized that this was not an adult, but a young guy, and his father must know this too. What Tanasia wants to hide is not Askan's identity, but the fact that he tried to escape, so it would be more believable to tell part of the truth. The man put the pen into the inkwell and thought. There was a certain meaning in my daughter's words. Everything was logical. But this is a mansion in which not just anyone lives, but Tanasia and Noxia, his beloved daughters. And for him, the safety of this mansion is above all else. Even if it was her servant, he was acting suspiciously and should be checked. At that moment, Tanasia became afraid for the future of her servant. Her father's gaze seemed to burn right through her. It seemed he understood everything. "But since you say so, I'll leave it for now," the man continued. But he warned that there would be no second time. If something like this were to happen again, he would not only conduct a thorough investigation, but would also expel from the mansion anyone who behaved suspiciously, regardless of whether he was guilty or not. The girl responded with relief that she understood everything, but the girl looked thoughtfully at her father, gathering courage to tell him something. "I have a favor to ask of you, father," she finally said, and he gave her permission to speak. Straightening up, she asked to be given a laboratory. "The laboratory," Oland Brelov repeated in surprise. The girl nodded, affirmatively. She wants to seriously study magical engineering, but it is inconvenient at home. Moreover, it is necessary so that the events of last night do not repeat themselves. At first, Oland was shocked by what he heard from his eldest daughter, but soon the man nodded affirmatively. He liked the girl's desire, and he promised that he would build her a laboratory, but Tanasia did not expect that he would agree to it so quickly. The man added that if she wants to study seriously, then one building is not a problem. He would pass on the details of the laboratory to her through specialists, for which Tanasia was very grateful to him. Having finished the conversation, the girl left her father's room and walked past the watchful bodyguard knight. Jin looked at the girl suspiciously, not trusting her behavior. "Sir, what the lady said is true, but she is definitely hiding something," he said to Sir Braylov. The man didn't deny it, although he didn't assume that she was hiding it. But he had already warned his daughter that it seemed she was diligently studying magical engineering, so this time he would turn a blind eye to everything. "By the way," the man added, and the knight immediately became wary. With a strange, satisfied smile, the gentleman asked if he thought Tanasia was somehow similar to him. A stunned Jen asked again what the gentleman had asked, but he was thinking that he thought his daughter would be scared when he told her about yesterday's incident, but he didn't expect her to ask for the lab. She has a business acumen when you give one thing and get two in return, so he is pleased. Maybe it was worth teaching her not magical engineering, but business. At that moment, a maid knocked on the door and brought tea to the master. Mr. Braylov answered with surprise because he had not ordered any tea. But when he heard that it was Lady Tanasia who asked him to bring him tea because he was tired, his heart skipped a beat. He allowed them to bring tea while thinking that his daughter had taken care of her father. Tanasia was also eating at this time, and the maid, putting the food on the table, asked to call her if the lady needed anything. "Father said he would leave yesterday's incident behind," the girl thought, wondering if she could relax now. Oland is famous for his consistency in words and actions. He firmly adheres to the position that there is nothing more valuable to a person than trust. In other words, if this happens again, Askan will not escape punishment. In order to help Askan escape safely, you need to prepare carefully. "Lady, it's me!" A man's voice came from behind the door, and the girl allowed him to enter. As soon as the door opened, a servant appeared on the threshold, but his appearance left much to be desired. Tanasia, of course, noticed this and wondered if he hadn't slept at night either. While cutting the food lying on the plate into pieces, the girl wondered if anything special had happened during the night, if anyone had come in, if anyone had been watching him. She was also interested in whether he had hidden the jewelry she had given him that evening securely, since it had to be carefully hidden so that no one would see it, otherwise they would misunderstand. But all her questions remained unanswered, and the servant, it seemed, did not even hear her, so the girl had to call out to him. As if waking up, he replied that he had hidden the jewelry well, and nothing special had happened. Then the lady continued that he should not worry about other things. She discussed with her father what had happened at night, and they decided to leave it. But the young man was worried about the one they had encountered the night before, because he had turned out to be quite skilled, and perhaps the gentleman suspected something. But when the lady reassured him that everything was fine, Askan only nodded absent-mindedly. The girl did not understand why the young man looked away, and it seemed that he was not eating well. Could it be that he still didn't trust her? A bitter thought flashed through his mind. At last the meal was finished, and it was time for tea. Jaren prepared snacks and told me to call if I needed anything. The maid left the room, followed by her mistress's keen gaze. As soon as they were alone in the room, the girl stood up and said that she wanted to show Askana something. Putting the map on the table, she asked him if he had decided where he was going. The servant looked in surprise at the small map laid out in front of him. It turned out to be a map of Arwen's empire, and Tanasia was looking for a place where he could live. The girl pointed her finger at a certain point and asked how he liked this place. Showing the map to the servant, the girl leaned so low towards him that a strand of her hair touched the young man's cheek, causing him to tense up. She continued to show a place on the map that she thought was ideal for shelter. She found out that it was the southern region, so the climate there was warm and pleasant to live, a little far from the capital. But since it was a rural area, the people there were quite simple. Besides, visitors sometimes settled there. Tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, Tanasia asked him what he thought of the place, not noticing the bright red tips of the young man's ears. "Oh, lady," was all Askan could say in a breaking voice, and Tanasia looked at him in surprise. "You are too close." The young man's face began to turn red and his eyes were lowered down. Noticing the state he was in, the girl recoiled in surprise. She apologized for her involuntary behavior, to which he replied that it was nothing to worry about. He didn't look her in the eyes. He even tried to turn away, but Tanasia noticed his flushed face. She became worried. It seemed he had a fever. She started asking questions if he was okay and if he was sick. The young man shook his head, noting that everything was fine. But Tanasia still decided to check if he had a temperature and extended her hand. But her hand did not have time to touch his forehead, as it was intercepted by a strong male hand. Not expecting such a drastic action from the servant, Tanasia was slightly surprised and even scared. The young man looked at her with resentment and asked if she treated other people like that. When the girl asked again, not understanding what he was talking about, Askan repeated, "Does she really measure others' temperatures like that too?" The girl retorted that why should she care if someone else's temperature rises, since she is only worried because it is him. From these words of the girl, the young man's face turned even redder, and his eyes widened in surprise. "You don't like it that I measure your temperature?" The girl was surprised, watching his reaction. Besides, he was still holding her hand, and she felt that his hand was hot too. Askan pulled his hand away in embarrassment and apologized to the lady, but the girl was sure that he definitely had a fever. "It's not a fever, I'm just confused." The young man tried to justify himself, looking away from her. Rising from his seat, he promised her that he would take a closer look at the place she had mentioned, and as he had finished eating, he asked permission to leave. The girl, of course, did not detain him and allowed him to leave. Askan, without raising his eyes, walked towards the exit of the room. Tanasia looked after him in surprise, not understanding the reasons for such behavior. As the servant was leaving the room, he ran into Jaren at the door. The maid asked the mistress in surprise what had happened, because Askan's face was very red. She had never seen him like that. The maid looked thoughtfully at her mistress. It seemed she understood what had happened here, but when Tanasia asked what she understood, the girl said nothing. Tanasia was indignant. Did she really think that she had offended Askan, even though the maid tried to deny it? The door in the back room of the mansion slammed loudly, and Askan returned to his room. He was mentally indignant at how she could approach him so casually. On the table in the middle of the room stood his fully packed bag, ready for escape. In fact, he lied to her, saying that he had hidden the jewel well. All night he took out and looked at what she gave him. If he did not see them before his eyes, it seemed that everything that happened then was a dream. He fell asleep only after sunrise. For the first time since he escaped from the laboratory, he did not have nightmares. But instead, he dreamed of a lady with a radiant smile. But what just happened? Her scent, her voice, everything was so vivid that it couldn't even be compared to a dream. Askan still didn't realize what was happening to him. She asked if he liked it. She hoped that he would like it at least a little. All those moments when she was interested and worried about him came to mind. All these memories only made him blush even more. The lady is so beautiful that it is irritating. "Hello, ladies, nice to meet you." In front of Tanasia stood two young men, Robin and Tyler. They came on the orders of the Marquis, who said to discuss with her the details of the construction of the laboratory, and the girl invited them to sit down. Earlier, her father said that he would give her the details of the laboratory through specialists. It seems that these are the ones he was talking about, and since he brought them, it means they can be trusted. The girl asked if they had already decided on a location, and received the answer that they had already selected suitable places. After laying out the map, the young people explained that they had avoided areas close to the city center, as this could interfere with her research, and had also excluded areas that were too remote, as it would be difficult for her to get to. In Tanasia's opinion, the area on the outskirts of the capital has the largest land area, and she likes this place the most. But Robin objected. Didn't she think it would be difficult to get there? To which the girl replied that such a distance was just right. The young men then invited her to look at a sample drawing of the external and internal building, which Tanasia studied with interest. Putting the drawing aside, she sighed and noted that it was too simple. And she added that she had some wishes. She would like to have an underground bunker, and as many secret passages as possible, so that she could go outside unnoticed. Robin and Tyler listened in confusion, as the girl also wanted a food storage facility for emergencies and outer buildings that could withstand any attack. "Lady, this is practically a military fortress," Tyler noted sheepishly. The girl confirmed this with a smile, because since they were building a building, they couldn't just use it as a simple laboratory. She voiced exactly what she wanted to get in the end. If the lady wishes to do so, they will need approval from the imperial family, because by law, a building that contains the means to attack the imperial palace cannot be built without reason. Tanasia knew it. The only thing she wanted was solid outer walls and a few secret tunnels. Building a shelter was such a big deal. Robin confirmed with a frightened expression that this was, of course, not a problem. And after thinking about it again, he could say that she was right. And Tyler noted that this could lead to problems if someone discovered him. "So that's what you're getting at, gentlemen," said the girl. To the general surprise of the young people, "She's not interested in the building's appearance," the girl added with a smile. So she asked to build it in such a way that it would look as simple as possible. What is really important is the interior, Tanasia stunned the young people. So she hopes that they will include everything that she listed unnoticed. In a good mood, Tanasha Brelov walked through the garden near the mansion, humming to herself. A little earlier, construction specialists promised to come next time with drawings and also try to find the materials she mentioned. She was pleased with this outcome and glad that the number of ways for her death was slowly decreasing. While walking through the garden, she heard an unusual sound in the distance, not typical for it, and this sound interested her greatly, so she decided to take a look. A little further away, small but powerful lines of water were flying in the air. It was Noxia who trained her ability, honing it better and better. Tanasia watched her sister with interest as she trained hard. It looks like Noxia is training her ability, the girl thought. The younger sister, with a very concentrated look, controlled the water element, trying to fill a small vessel with it. Obeying the girl's instructions, the water, stream after stream, fell into the vase. As Noxia finished her training, Tanasia thought she looked like she was going to faint right then and there. Even though Noxia was born with a huge amount of magical power, she still cannot use her abilities without rest. Tanasia glanced at the bracelet on her hand with the magic stone. To compensate for the lack of innate magical power, a way to use the magic stone when the strength is at its limit must be invented. In any case, she would only distract her sister if she interrupted her training, so Tanasia decided to quietly go back. But before she could move away, she heard a muffled scream behind her, and although the scream was not loud, the girl turned around in fear to see what had happened. Frightened by the surprise, Noxia pressed her left hand to herself and shook with fear. Tanasia immediately called out to her. The girl looked at her in surprise. She was very surprised to see Tanasia in front of her and asked what she was doing there, to which the girl replied that she was just passing by when she heard a loud scream, which is why she was here. Noxia explained that she was trying to fill the glass with water, but suddenly it moved. Tanasia asked to look at her wound, noticing that it was bleeding heavily, so the bleeding had to be stopped first. But since there was nothing nearby that looked like a scarf, Tanasia had no other choice. Pulling herself together, she asked Noxia to wait while she called the maid. But something else happened that adjusted her intentions. Suddenly, a heavy downpour began, which could have radically changed all plans. She asked if Noxia could use her powers to stop the rain, but she just shook her head. Normally, she would be able to create an umbrella out of water that would protect them, but now she was too tired for that. Then there is only one thing left to do, said the elder sister, and she set to work. She lifted the hem of her dress, intending to do everything to help her sister. And the next moment, with one light movement of her hand, she tore her dress, tearing off a piece of fabric. The younger sister watched in horror what the older one was doing. Take this and stop the bleeding. Make sure the rain doesn't get on your wound. She wrapped a piece of fabric from her dress tightly around Noxius's arm, and Tanasia herself said that she would run to the estate and bring someone to help. Noxia was shocked that her sister was going to run right in the rain, but she noticed that everything was fine and she would return soon, asking the girl to wait a little under the tree. Before Noxia could say anything else, her sister had already rushed away, and she herself remained waiting under the tree, holding her wounded hand tied with a piece of yellow cloth. "Oh my God, my lady, you were running in the rain," the maids asked Tanasia worriedly. Drying her hair with a towel, she said that everything was fine, only her clothes were a little wet. "But what if you catch a cold?" the girls persisted, while Tanasia glanced towards Noxia. The younger sister was surrounded by even more maids who were worried about her, saying that they would draw a bath, which she could take immediately after the treatment. In fact, it was a happy coincidence that Tanasia was there when it happened. The wound is not life-threatening or anything else, but she is still sure that it was hard for Noxia, especially in the pouring rain. The girl also noticed that blood had gotten on her dress, and it wouldn't hurt to wash her hands first. After going into the bathroom, Tanasia calmly washed her hands, thinking about everything that was happening. When the girl was almost finished, behind the closed door she heard something she shouldn't have heard. "Did you see Lady Noxia hurt herself?" one maid asked another ingratiatingly. She heard from another servant that Lady Tanasia had pushed Lady Noxia from behind and she had fallen. Tanasia listened to this version of events in shock. The maid girls thought that she had been suspiciously quiet the day before and thought that she had pushed Noxia when she saw her sister training. It was no wonder that there was this constant feeling that Noxia's maids were talking about her behind her back. The girl decided that she should say a few words to them. She grabbed the doors with purpose, but still hesitated a little. Although the maids are not wrong, given Tanasia's behavior in the original, the girl's hands dropped. She decided that it was better not to wake up trouble, because she knew that she had a reputation as a villain. Maybe it would be better to let people who didn't know her that well speak. "Girls, what nonsense are you talking about?" A third voice suddenly rang out, and Tanasia immediately recognized him, because it was Sister Noxia. "She ran in the rain just to get help to me as quickly as possible. How can you say such a thing without knowing the whole story?" Noxia scolded her maids. She looked very determined, which was unusual for her before. But what is Noxia doing here? Tanasia wondered. The maids tried to object that it was true that Lady Tanasia had caused Lady Noxia great difficulties, and she hit her again. But Noxia interrupted their speech with a shout. It seemed that they both didn't understand something. She'd allowed this to continue as long as she thought they were acting out of concern for her. But now they had finally crossed the line. For spreading rumors, the girl threatened to punish them after talking to the head butler. The maids tried to object, not believing in the seriousness of their mistress's intentions, but she only sternly said that they were fired. "And now I want to be alone," the girl said in a voice with metallic notes that was unusual for her. And the maid was forced to listen to her mistress, hurrying to leave. Tanasia, who had become an involuntary witness to this incident, thought with relief that she could leave after waiting a couple of minutes. What she didn't expect was Noxia asking if she was still there. Standing on the other side of the door, Noxia apologized. She had been looking for her since Tanasia suddenly disappeared, and didn't know that she had heard such unflattering things about herself. So she apologized for the maid's behavior. All this time she had been acting both mature and stupid, and she thought that these maids were just trying to protect her. Tanasia listened to her sister's speech with surprise, not daring to say anything in response. Then she simply opened the door and walked out of the bathroom, noting that the maids weren't completely wrong, so Noxia didn't need to apologize. Tanasia didn't care what they thought, so Noxia shouldn't worry about it either. But the girl didn't think so. She said that she would take it into account, but she understood that these words could hurt her sister. "I'm fine, really," Tanasia answered with a smile. Anyway, why was Noxia training all alone? She should have brought a maid with her. But the girl replied that she thought she would tire them out by making them look at the same thing over and over again for hours. Here Tanasia was surprised that her sister had been training for so long, and Noxia added that there would be a festival at the academy very soon. A festival at the academy? Tanasia was surprised, remembering what kind of event it was. In the original novel, people with special talents would gather every few years to showcase their skills and achievements. A day filled with various performances called the Academy Festival. This is not just a small party in the Arwen Empire, but a moment when countless people from nearby countries gather. Noxia Brailoff is always awarded as a person with very high potential, and is considered a talent who has shown the highest improvement in skills in a short period of time. That's why she trained so hard, Tanasia thought. And she asked that her sister must be very tired, because she always tries to protect her reputation and status. "I'm fine, at least that's what I've always done," Noxia replied, looking like an angel who had come down from heaven. She looked so grown up, so conscious and such a responsible girl that Tanasia was touched. And the next moment she reached out and stroked her sister's head. "Sister, are you stroking my head right now?" Noxia asked, not believing what was happening. And Tanasia replied that she was proud of her sister for doing all this work, and also thanked her for everything she said for her. The little sister's eyes sparkled with joy, and finally her sister stroked her head. How happy Noxia was, enjoying her sister's friendly attitude. Looking at her, Tanasia thought that she hadn't planned to go so deep into her relationship with Noxia. But how could she not do it if her sister was so cute? Now that she thought about it, Tanasia realized that the Academy Festival was being used as an excuse to continue the story. Noxia and Roel, who first met at the Imperial Palace, will have to meet again at the festival. This is also the event where a second male character will appear, who will soon fall in love with Noxia. What should Tanasia do now? Now Noxia and Roel see each other as enemies. Maybe she should leave everything as is. But no, she was the one who ruined everything by suddenly interfering, so maybe it's worth staying away from this. Ahem! The teacher coughed nearby, noticing that his student was clearly in the clouds. It seems like yesterday she said that she wanted to learn magic from him, but now it seems she changed her mind. Varnan was indignant. The girl replied sheepishly that she was just thinking about something, but the teacher was adamant that whatever it was, now was not the best time. Varnin added that Tanasia should not tarnish his name at the Academy Festival, and upon hearing this phrase, the girl asked again why he suddenly remembered the festival. "Metella hasn't told you yet," the teacher was surprised. "I'm going to participate in the upcoming festival as a judge." But Tanasia asked again that he had said something about not tarnishing his name, and did that mean that she was accompanying him? Varnin was already starting to get angry. Did Tanasia really consider herself ordinary, after all? She was a genius of magical engineering. She was really shocked by the way the teacher called her. Varnin continued that she didn't talk about it only so that she wouldn't become too self-confident. But he himself had to spend 10 years analyzing and studying the magic stones. And she did it all through simple reading. "You have more than reached the level of participation in the festival." Teacher Varnin concluded his speech. She asked again if this meant that she should go there and show her skills, to which the teacher replied in the affirmative. And he put a drawing of her pistol on the table right in front of her, and that was what she should go with. Although the girl objected that it was not ready yet, he noted that there was no need to complete it. The very fact that she could invent such a weapon would make everyone faint with admiration. Tanasia didn't seem to agree with this at all. Suspecting something, she asked when he accepted her as his student whether he had envisaged this moment, which made the man shudder. And while Varnin was indignant that this was an excellent opportunity to show what magical engineering was capable of, the girl was thinking about her own. Under these circumstances, she will be able to take part in the festival and see everything that is happening. And she agreed, but still wanted to improve this weapon. Even though Tanasia said it so confidently, weapons with magic stones cannot be used indefinitely. Even her bracelet with light magic can only be used 3 times. The same can be said about the magic pistols. After 3 shots, the weapon becomes useless. If she wants to win the festival, she must find a way to increase her firepower beyond 3 bullets. If she fails to achieve this, the value of the gun as a weapon will greatly decrease, and the presentation of her idea at the festival will become meaningless. Over the next few days, Tanasia kept thinking about how she could make the firepower more powerful. "My lady?" Askan's insinuating voice came from behind her, causing her to shudder, emerging from her thoughts. The servant noticed that the lady was deep in thought about something, and he warned her that she would crash into something if she continued to fly in the clouds. Askan asked if the lady was going to meet the one she called teacher, and the girl confirmed this. With each day approaching the festival, she had more and more thoughts. She also suggested that Askana go with her, since he also needed to prepare for the festival. And in response to the servant's surprised face, she asked if he had ever seen a thread that did not follow the needle. Askan was surprised by such a comparison of their relationship with the mistress, but he liked it. Without thinking twice, he agreed to her proposal, and Tanasia laughed happily. He finally stopped resisting her orders. But Askan noticed that this was all because he was not in a position to resist. Anyway, Tanasia plans to go to the teacher's laboratory, and then the servant asked if she would return early today. The girl was surprised by this assumption and asked why. But it was as if a blow had hit her on the head when the servant replied that today was the anniversary of Madame's death. If Askan calls someone Madame, it must be only one person. Her father's one and only beloved, Olanda Brelov, and her and Noxia's mother, Charlene Lee Rosen. This also means that her father is already drinking. As someone who has already read the original novel, she knows the cause of Charlene's death. "Where is my father now?" she asked Askana, already guessing the answer to her question. Strong golden alcohol filled the glass on the table to the brim. Olin Brelov looked sadly ahead, but seemed to see nothing. In his hands, he clutched a small pendant, which was as dear to him as it was to his daughter. The pendant opened, revealing a photograph of a beautiful young woman with dark hair and red eyes, Charlene. He remembered that day just as vividly, even decades later. The little girl peeked out from behind her mother's dress, stared at him in surprise, and asked his name. It was the first meeting with his nanny's daughter, Charlene. The nanny immediately corrected the girl, telling her to address the young master properly. "I am Oland," replied the young gentleman, putting the hat from his head on the girl. He was only 8 years old then, and Charlene was 5. They didn't see the difference in their classes, so they only used these formal addresses when there were any adults around. They called each other by name only when they were alone. They were together before they even started growing up, so Charlene is present in all his memories. Her sweetness as a child, her madness as a young girl, and her beauty when she became a beautiful lady. There was no one who understood him better than Charlene, and no one could entertain him and make him laugh as she could. He witnessed all the stages of her growing up. They were more than just friends now, at least on his side. But even after so much time, he did not understand his feelings for her. And then one day, when they were sitting under a tree, the girl said that she would soon be married off. He listened in amazement as she talked about how she had already reached the right age, and her mother continued to tell her to get married as soon as possible. She went on a date with the son of the owner of that little shop on the main street, and it seemed like everything was heading towards marriage. He couldn't believe what the hell he just heard. Will Charlene marry another man, share her life with another man, raise a child that will be hers and another man's, and they will live happily? Olin did not understand his feelings and became obsessed with the idea of not allowing Charlene to date again. He secretly visited Charlene's partners and threatened them that he would use all his power if they did not do as he wanted. Looking at each of these men, he couldn't believe that this was the kind of man Charlene needed. In the end, it was Charlene who stopped him. One day, she came to him and told him to stop doing this. She knows about his meetings with the men she was with. If he does this out of pure concern for her, then he can stop. He tried to explain the reasons for his actions, but the girl only thanked him for worrying about her. But this is her life, and she will make decisions herself. She will refuse any of his attempts to interfere in her life. She was not a person who would easily give in to the words of others. Once they saw this side of her, no one could resist falling in love with her. Then he realized what this oppressive feeling was that had long overcome him, and he also realized that all his childhood actions were committed only because of his own feelings. "I did it because I was afraid for you," the young man replied, blushing, and he added that he couldn't live without her, thereby surprising the girl. The thought of her leaving him for some other man caused him so much pain, his fists clenched with impotent anger. The girl asked in shock why he was saying this so suddenly. But the answer discouraged her even more. "I like you." "No, I love you." He forced himself to look into her eyes. For the first moment, the girl was stunned into silence. But, having come to my senses, I asked him to stop joking about it, because it was not funny at all. But Oland was not joking at all. He would never laugh about it. Charlene was about to leave, and he tried to stop her by grabbing her hand, but she was now clinging to him, not wanting to listen to anything. "Enough, young master," the girl cried out loudly. And he had to stop, because in private she never called him young master. "Does he really think they can be together? They are not children anymore?" the girl said, offended. And Charlene was absolutely right about that. They were no longer children. They had grown up and become adults. And when they grew up, they realized that the differences in their status were obvious. Too obvious. The moment he looked into Charlene's eyes, he finally knew what he had to do. He was obsessed with ending all relationships with her. What a fool he was. "Charlene, please wait for me. I will become so powerful that no one, absolutely no one, will dare to say anything to us," the young man promised. The girl listened to his words with bated breath, as he said that he would make sure that the whole world knew about them. With his hand on his heart, the young gentleman solemnly promised this to his beloved. After he inherited all the property of the Brelov family, he used business and connections to increase the power of his family. He did all this for Charlene, so that he could boldly marry her. And when the solemn event was already very close, Charlene, during their conversation, said that she knew that he had many admirers, and if he really decided to marry her, then he would definitely regret it one day. A young man approached a girl looking at a beautiful summer sunset. "You're wrong," he said, hugging the girl from behind. He will never regret choosing her. Giving herself entirely to these feelings, the girl believed. She wanted to believe him with all her heart. Their first kiss, a gentle embrace so as not to break her tender and small figure in his arms. Charlene looked stunning in her white wedding dress, and he was overjoyed that the world was now his to call his own. When he held Tanasia and Noxia in his arms, there was nothing else in the world he could desire so much. Loving Charlene, marrying her, having children, he thought that he and Charlene could live a peaceful life and grow old together. But fate had its own terrible plans, and on that fateful evening he held his dying wife in his arms as she bled to death. He begged her with all his might to be patient a little longer. The doctor would arrive soon. While he was away from home on a business trip, an unknown killer entered the house and attacked. By the time he returned, it was all over. With her last strength reaching out with her bloody hand to her husband's cheek, Charlene asked him to promise that he would raise Tanasia and Noxia in love. "What are you saying?" He was shaking all over from the unreality of what was happening. But he asked his wife not to speak, because when she speaks, blood flows from her mouth. Charlene asked to raise Tanasia and Noxia in a way that would not be embarrassing. But the man got angry at these words. Why is she talking like that? While she is still alive, he will not fulfill this request, so they ask her not to die. While hugging the body of his dying wife, Olen Brelov nevertheless promised to fulfill her request. Even if she is not in this world, he will raise Tanasia and Noxia well and will definitely keep his promise. If she had not asked him to take care of their daughters, he would have given his life that very day to follow her. Even now, more than 10 years after Charlene's death, he can still see the moment she took her last breath. If only he could find the man who killed Charlene and get revenge, then he wouldn't be sitting here drinking. From that day until now, they have been investigating and looking for the criminal, but they have not even been able to find a trace of him. So, the fact that this person can hide even now means that the criminal's status is definitely not low. Who is he that it is still impossible to catch him? This question tormented Hollanda all his life. Interrupting his thoughts, Jen entered the room with a tray in her hands. "I didn't think I told you to come in," the gentleman remarked unfriendly. But the knight was not at all embarrassed, and noticed that he had been drinking too much. In addition, the gentleman does not tolerate alcohol well, to which he noted that he still does not have enough of it. It is not enough for him. Then Jen wordlessly placed a tray on the table, and Oland was surprised at what it was. The cook had prepared some hangover-friendly snacks, but she was stuck at the door. So Jen decided to bring them to him himself. Confused, he said he hadn't asked for anything like that. And then Jen explained that, as the maid said, Lady Tanasia had ordered it to be done. She said that if the gentleman drank so much he would feel ill, so she sent him some snacks. A few days ago, the maid also brought him tea that he did not order, and it was also said that Lady Tanasia ordered him to be served tea that relieves fatigue. Olan Brelov laughed with relief. He liked what was happening now so much. Every day since Charlene left him had been hell, during which time his daughter had grown so much. "I always bother Tanasia," the man added sadly. He was often absent from the mansion, and Noxia was too sleepy to eat breakfast, but the day after the anniversary of her mother's death, they always gathered as a family and had breakfast. And this time, the tradition was not broken. The whole family gathered around the table. Having first found out how everyone had slept that night, they finally began to eat. Olan thanked Tanasia for the snacks she sent him yesterday, and the girl was genuinely glad that he liked them. She sent them because she wanted her father to take care of himself while he drank, and she suggested that next time we have a drink together. This proposal somewhat discouraged Oland, and he looked thoughtfully at his daughter. Tanasia added that for now she will drink something non-alcoholic, and when she becomes an adult, she will be able to drink alcohol because two is better than alone. Noxia asked in surprise if alcohol was bad for your health and hoped that her father and sister would not drink too much. To which Tanasia philosophically noted that sometimes this is necessary in life, and when Noxia grows up, she will understand this. The father watched his eldest daughter with surprise. If someone heard this, they would think that she had already drunk alcohol. Tanasia was a little scared, because the way she said it was so thoughtless. But he agreed with his daughter's proposal. Next time they will do as she said. He hadn't really thought about it, but he didn't think it would be bad, so next time they'll drink together. Tanasia was glad that her father approved her proposal. "Me too. 3 people are better than 2, Noxia said. And Oland and Tanasia laughed merrily, agreeing with her words. Family, the girl had nothing like this in her past life. Although vague, sometimes memories of Tanasia's childhood pop into her head. Moments when they were all together and loved each other very much. She had no family, so these memories seem precious to her. After coming to this world, her only goal was to survive and not die. But today she has a new goal. On the empty chair sat, as if an invisible shadow, the ghost of Charlene Brelov, his beloved wife and mother. And looking at her sweet, smiling face, Tanasia firmly decided to find the man who killed her mother. Since the original wasn't finished yet, she also didn't know who the culprit was. Since the truth about Charlene's death wasn't revealed for a long time in the original, that must mean it would be extremely difficult to imagine how huge the shadow was behind it. In order to survive and catch the criminal, Tanasia must first complete the gun. And when the girl was working hard again, a cup of tea landed on the table in front of her. It was Askan who brought the lady a drink for her to drink while she worked. While pondering the drawing, the girl asked the servant to look at it. "Is this the magical weapon you are developing?" the servant asked, examining the drawing carefully. In his opinion, it looked very unusual. It seems easy to use because of its small size, but he is worried about how powerful it will be. In fact, everything is as he said. At the moment, the weapon's blind spot is in power. And when Askan asked what attribute the weapon had, the girl replied that it had the attribute of fire, the principle being that the magic stone swirls the fire to strengthen it and create a big explosion. Askan thought about something for a while and then expressed his thought. How about adding something else to enhance the fire? For example, something like a magic stone with the properties of the winds. Tanazia was surprised that he was really suggesting adding another magic stone, but the next moment it dawned on her what was so surprising, and why she hadn't thought of it before. Given the size of the gun, it can only hold one magic stone, and there is a limit to the power that a fire magic stone of a suitable size can produce. But if you insert half of a fire magic stone and half of a wind magic stone, then due to the resulting synergy, the power can increase to the desired degree. Until now, she had only focused on the design of the gun itself, but had not even thought about improving the magic stone. In a fit of emotion, the girl suddenly rose from her seat and called the servant by name. And what happened next greatly surprised and shocked the young man. Expressing great joy, the girl rushed to hug Askan. She thanked the young man for his help, hugging him tightly and calling him a genius. Askan himself was so surprised that he couldn't move, but he felt that the girl's embrace was very pleasant to him. "Have you found the answer?" Askan asked, stammering and blushing. Tanasia, continuing to hug him tightly, replied that now the weapon would be as powerful as she wanted. Finally, she would be able to construct it. Askan was glad that he could help her somehow, and his hands, hanging at his sides at that time, timidly reached out to the girl hugging him. Still, the shaking hands timidly touched the lady's waist. At that moment, Tanasia herself pulled away from him and apologized for hugging him only because she wanted to. Askan was not against it, and he told the girl about it directly. I blushed from head to toe. But in order to somehow smooth over the awkwardness, he asked if she would now go to the man she calls a teacher. To which Tanasia replied that she would go to him to return the reference materials and tell him this news, so she would stay with him for some time. "Okay then," Askan answered somewhat emotionlessly. And the girl noticed a change in his mood, which puzzled her greatly. She suggested going to the laboratory together in the afternoon, since she needed to take a lot of books back. When the time came, Tanasia walked proudly ahead, urging the servant to follow her, but he in turn told him to go slower, otherwise she would fall. As soon as the girl reached the laboratory, she joyfully called the teacher. Varnan didn't expect to see her at this time and asked what she was doing there, but the girl happily said that she had finally found a solution to increase the power of the gun. She thinks they can make it much more powerful by upgrading and combining the fire and wind magic stones. While the teacher and student were happily discussing the possibilities of improving the pistol, Askan stood at the entrance. The young man watched their conversation with suspicion, and the way they spoke to each other somehow unpleasantly pricked the young man. When Tanazia finally told the teacher all the details, he remarked that this was to be expected from his student and extended his hand to her. Varnan's hand touched the soft hair, but the next moment everyone present realized that something unusual was happening. The teacher's hand was stroking not the head of his student, but the head of Lady Tanasia's servant. The man immediately pulled his hand away, asking who it was, and the girl replied that it was her personal servant. She had heavy bags today, so she took him with her. Still holding the books in his hands, Askan asked where he should put them, to which Tanasia replied that he could place them on the empty bookshelf. She and the teacher continued their discussions. They said that it was time for her to try to assemble her work on her own, to which the girl replied that that was why she had rushed to him. She had a medal in mind, but she wanted to consult with him. At this time, Askan was calmly arranging books on the shelves, without ceasing to listen attentively to their conversation. The teacher and student talked for a long time, discussing the work. And all this time, Askan looked with suspicion at the man and his attitude towards the lady. The lady was too close to this man and he didn't like it. And how she smiled when she looked at her teacher with such enthusiasm. Askan's mood became increasingly worse and he became more and more gloomy. And teacher Varnan also felt it. Some kind of dark aura that thickened around him. And then he whispered to the girl, what about her servant? After all, he had been looking at him for a long time with such eyes, as if he was going to eat him. Very frightening. Maybe he was starving. But Tanasia replied that this could not be, and she cared about him very much. The girl looked thoughtfully at her servant, wondering if he really felt uncomfortable here. Avoiding the lady's gaze, Askan turned away, not wanting to explain his condition. And then the girl hurried to say goodbye to the teacher, promising to contact him when the details were ready, and she and Askan got into the carriage to return home. The girl asked him if he liked the laboratory, and the servant replied that it was definitely not the place for her. It was cramped and dirty. But Tanisha never cared about it. On the contrary, a little disorder makes her feel at ease. But she believes that Askin himself did not like the lab. And the young man looked at her in surprise, not expecting such a question. The girl explained that it seemed to her that he didn't like something. She brought him there only today because of things, so he wouldn't have to go there anymore. He wondered if he hadn't come with her today, she would have been left alone with the man she called teacher. And the girl confirmed this, not understanding what he was getting at. The young man's mood became gloomy again, and he asked what kind of person this was to the lady. Maybe she had special feelings for him. Tanisha seemed to not believe her ears. "What? Why are you suddenly asking such a thing?" She was indignant. To which Askin replied that it seemed to him that they were close, and this man casually wanted to stroke her head. And he leaned too close to her and whispered something. And when Lady Tanisha was with him, her eyes literally shone with happiness. After listening to his speech, the girl asked with disgust if Askin knew how old her teacher was, and received the answer that he looked over 50. She then asked him if he knew how old she was, to which the servant replied that she was the same age as him. At this point, Tanisha couldn't stand it any longer and literally shouted out whether he was really asking her if she had feelings for the teacher. Of course, for some, age is just a number in love, but not for her. She respects the teacher for teaching her, but she never had any feelings for him. What did Askin see that made him think that way? If the teacher heard it, he would laugh out loud. The young man repeated that the man had come very close to the lady, and it seemed she did not mind. But overall, Tanisha didn't understand how this was connected to the reason why he didn't like the lab. The young man's hands began to shake, and he timidly said that in fact, it was difficult for him to control his powers when he was emotionally unstable, which greatly surprised Tanisha. It wasn't that he didn't like the lab, seeing her in close contact with another person, it happened to him, and the servant extended his hand to the mistress. And seeing the outstretched hand, the girl was surprised to notice some changes in it. The young man's finger changed color and became steel. Askin explained that for a moment she felt that she couldn't control her power, so his finger was like that from the lab. Tanisha couldn't believe that he was so excited about her closeness with the teacher. She, of course, knows that Askin is loyal to his work, but she didn't know that he was so protective of her. Besides, it's a big problem that he can't completely. If Askin loses his temper, not only she, but also others could be in danger. Therefore, the girl replied that she understood everything and would try not to get too close to other people. It was not difficult. The servant did not expect that the mistress would agree with his opinion, but Tanisha added that she also did not want to be misunderstood, but in return, he should also try to find a way to control his power so that his abilities would not manifest due to strong emotions. The young man added that it was easier said than done, but the girl promised to help him in any way she could. And although Askin was pleased to take care of his mistress, some thoughts still did not leave his head. In a moment of joy, without thinking, she hugged him tightly. And then the young man asked the lady for one favor. The girl was surprised by such a request, but still agreed to listen to his request. And it was that if he could control his abilities, he would very much like her to reward him. "Do you want a reward?" The girl was surprised again, not expecting such a request from her servant, and Askin that even though it is for himself, he would like to receive a reward for learning to control his power as she wishes. And when Tanisha asked what he wanted, Askin could not formulate his desires. Looking at how the young man was silent, the girl was at a loss as to what he wanted as far as she knew him. She didn't think that he was so greedy that he wanted something grandiose. Seeing how he hesitated to speak, she asked him to think carefully about what he wanted, and when he could control his power, she would give him what he wanted. The young man asked what would happen if he asked for something too valuable. Then the girl stared at him in shock. Not understanding what he was getting at, whether he really wanted her life, Tanisha answered a little rudely that she would try to fulfill everything. It seems that this was enough for Askin. He agreed to these conditions. At another meeting with specialists, they showed Tanisha new drawings that hid secret passages, developed one after another by different specialists. So no one except Robin knows the general plan. Once the lab is built, the plans will be disposed of, so the lady doesn't have to worry. He won't give out the building plan to anyone. But the girl didn't worry about that. It's not that she trusts Robin, whom she's only seen twice. It's just that she trusts her father, who sent him to her. As for the building material, since she wants a simple look on the outside, they will use brick for it, and the inside will be made of titanium, Tyler added. The girl was surprised what kind of material it was, and Tyler explained that it was a special material used for building battle fortresses. The meaning of the name of the material is indestructible. They plan to pay special attention to building an underground bunker from this ore. Thanking them for their work, Tanasia said that she trusts them and gives them enough time, and they, in turn, should try to make the laboratory ideal. The young people also promised to do everything possible for their part. Thus began the construction of the laboratory and the creation of a full-fledged weapon. With the help of the teacher, Tanasia continued to modify the design, tried to improve the work of the magic stones, and continued her research. Meanwhile, the conference was approaching. The teacher finally got all the necessary parts she asked for. Varnin said to add all the missing parts of the structure that Tanasia had already assembled. And the girl immediately began to assemble the weapon, and soon it was completely ready. And while Tanasia was collecting her work, the teacher looked suspiciously at Askan, who was standing right there. Calling out to him, he noted that they had already seen each other last time, to which the servant only nodded affirmatively. But his appearance was very unfriendly. Rather, he was even unpleasant to see the teacher, which the latter, of course, noticed, mentally noting that the young man was not at all nice. Soon, Tanasia was looking thoughtfully at her fully prepared pistol. Inside the structure she had thought out was a magic stone, made up of 2 different parts. The girl realized with surprise that she had finally finished everything, and now she had a ready-made weapon. "Congratulations, this is your first weapon," Teacher Varnin noted, thereby bringing the girl out of her thoughts. Tanasia thanked him because she managed to collect the weapon thanks to him, but Varnin interrupted her, that these formalities were enough, and now all that remained was to see the result with her own eyes. Before she arrived, he had already prepared the wasteland. "The teacher has taken measures to keep people away from the area, so it's time for them to leave." Soon the 3 of you were standing in the vacant lot opposite the target. Still getting used to the weight of the weapon in her hands, the girl understood that she was nervous before the shot. And what if something went wrong? Noticing her indecision, Askin suggested that she try to shoot first. Since this is her first development, there is a risk that something will go wrong, so the servant thinks that it is better for him to try first. But the girl still did not dare to expose someone else to such a risk. Coming a little closer to her, Askan added in a whisper that his body was special. Even if the weapon misfires, if he makes it steel, he will not be harmed, so he asks to leave it to him. His argument sounded convincing, and after thinking for a bit, the girl agreed. As she handed him the weapon, she told him that he first needed to seal the stone by dripping her blood onto it. Without thinking much, Askan bit his finger until it bled and dripped onto the magic stone inside the weapon. Then Tanasia showed how to hold the weapon by bringing both hands together. Before shooting, you need to stretch your arms forward. The target must fall from the sight in order to shoot accurately. Standing next to the servant, Tanasia instructed him that in order to aim, he had to look at the target with both eyes. Although the lady was essentially just giving instructions, her proximity once again embarrassed Askan. "I'll try, lady. Step back," asked the young man. Although there were some risks that things would not go as planned, overall Askan was not afraid. Raising his hands as the lady had shown, he pointed the pistol at the target and took aim. When the aiming point coincided with the center of the target, Askan knew that the time had come. The finger on the trigger slowly tensed, setting the trigger mechanism in motion. Teacher Varnin, as well as Lady Tanasia, watched what was happening with bated breath. There was a deafening explosion of incredible power, accompanied by a bright flash of fire. This column of fire rushed towards the target at great speed. And what happened next made Tanasia's eyes widen in surprise. As soon as the charge reached the target, another deafening explosion was heard, and the target was literally blown to pieces. A few seconds later, when the black smoke from the shot cleared, all that remained of the target was a pile of charred pieces of wood. The demonstration not only surprised, but literally shocked everyone present. None of them expected such power. A few seconds later, the teacher was the first to come to his senses. He was incredibly happy and even delighted. Anyone who sees this will be amazed. Tanasia, in turn, rushed to Askan, asking if everything was okay with him, but the young man misunderstood and replied that there were no problems with the weapon. "No, I'm not talking about weapons, I'm talking about you," the girl repeated excitedly, approaching the servant. At first, the young man did not understand what she was talking about, but soon it dawned on him that the lady was worried not about the weapon, but about him, and he replied that he was fine. He was just a little surprised by the recoil, because it was stronger than he expected. But the girl still wanted to make sure for herself that he was not hurt anywhere. At this time, the teacher Varnon, overwhelmed with joy, was delighted with the success of his student, and spreading his arms, he headed towards her. Seeing this, Tanasia instantly changed her position, trying her best to avoid the teacher's embrace. Considering that the danger had already passed, she took Askan by the arm and headed back to the house, leaving the teacher perplexed. Varnon was slightly upset when he noticed that the student had decided to dump him after a successful test, but the girl retorted that she was quite old and would not be happy hugging the teacher. With her servant Askan, the girl walked towards the house with measured steps. Continuing on his way, Askan asked why the lady suddenly behaved like that. He felt like she was deliberately dodging her teacher, and the girl confirmed that she was just trying not to be too friendly with other people, since Askan had said that he didn't like it. Hearing these words, the young woman was surprised to think that this was exactly what was worrying her. Tanasia did not calm down and kept asking if Askan's hands and wrists hurt or anything else, to which he replied that everything was fine, and there was not even a need to make the body steel. Rather, he was more surprised by the weapon she created, and the girl wondered why. In fact, Askan couldn't even imagine that such a small weapon could have such enormous power. So he thinks she's truly amazing. These words sounded like a compliment, which made the girl blush slightly. The young man continued that the lady had worked hard, sleeping all night and skipping meals to bring this amazing invention to fruition. "I'll be honest, I have great respect for you," the young man said sincerely. His words truly sounded like the biggest compliment in her life, which made Tanasia smile. "True," the girl asked again, smiling broadly, pleased with the compliments she had heard. And again the girl's whole appearance warmly touched the young man's heart. She looked so beautiful, and he had to repeat that he really thought so, which made the young man embarrassed. Tanasia realized that Askan was not one of those who flattered pointlessly, so it was very pleasant to hear such words from him. She suggested that they should have something to eat as soon as they returned, perhaps because she had relaxed, she felt hungry, and the servant agreed with his mistress. Later that day, at a family dinner, Noxia congratulated her sister on her successful test. Now she too will be able to participate in the conference with her, the girl rejoiced. But Tanasia added that since they are in different directions, they will likely spend more time apart than together. The father of the family was very happy that both of his daughters would participate in the conference. What they had already done was worthy of pride, so let them not get hung up on the rating and enjoy the process. "Don't worry, father, I'm already happy that I'll be able to participate there," said Tanasia, and she mentally added that in any case, what she wanted was not to achieve outstanding results at the conference. She just wants to see how things develop. Oland heard from Matella that she had developed a new magical weapon, and the girl confirmed this, but added that she would hold on to it to present it at a conference later, to which his father in turn said that he had decided to attend the conference this time to see the presentation with his own eyes. To his daughter's surprised exclamation, Oland explained that the Brelov family was sponsoring this conference. As sponsors who donate the largest amount to the conference each year, they are free to attend, which made Noxia wonder why he never came to watch. Although this can be called the rights of a sponsor, it does not change the fact that, in essence, this is an abuse of power. Since this year 2 of his daughters are participating in the conference, then he cannot not come. When else will he have a chance to see this, if not now? Looking closely at her father, Tanasia thought that in the original, Oland was always more of a husband than a father. He was a man dedicated to finding the culprit in Charlene's murder. It's not that he was heartless, but he couldn't pay enough attention to his daughters. But it seems like he's changing now. And that's not even bad, no, that's even good. In her past life, she didn't have a family, so she really didn't know what it was like to have parents take an interest in her studies, but now she seemed to be slowly beginning to understand. "The fact that my father will come to see me motivates me more," Tanasia said with a smile, feeling an unknown early feeling of care. Noxia also added that she would work harder to show her father her best results. But he moderated their ardor a little, asking them not to strain themselves. He would just watch how they showed themselves and enjoy it. Tanasia watched the sweet family conversations with a smile. So this is what it's like to have a family taking care of you. On the day of the conference, the sisters packed their things and were ready to leave for the venue. Noxia was surprised that they would travel in 2 carriages. Did Tanasia really want to travel separately from her? But the older sister replied that they were staying there for several days, so she needed to take a lot of things with her. If they put everything in one carriage, it would be too cramped. Taking her sister's arguments into account, Noxia said goodbye with a smile, adding that they would meet at the conference. Sitting down in her seat in the carriage, Tanasia thought about who else would be participating in the conference. Apart from Noxia, Roel, and the second male protagonist who falls in love with Noxia in the future, she can't remember anyone else. But the girl's thoughts were interrupted by the quiet call of her maid, sitting opposite. Jareen said she heard that Miss Krisha would also be participating. This was unexpected news, Tanasia thought, but Liana also had magical abilities, so it was only logical that she would participate. Their last meeting was not very friendly, to put it mildly. Jaren, who mentioned Lady Krisha, glanced sideways at Asken, sympathizing with the young man. Asken himself became a little despondent, realizing that there might be problems with the lady's friend again. Tanasia stared at her servants in confusion. Are they afraid that she will start a fight with Liana again? Jaren waved her hands in fear. They say that she didn't think so, but Asken answered directly that he was worried. The servant's straightforwardness surprised both the maid and Lady Tanasia herself. And the young man continued that the last time the lady parted with her on bad terms, and there was no reconciliation after that. That is, the quarrel should not have arisen at all. It was all because of him. Tanasia tried to calm him down, saying that she did not regret having quarreled with Lady Krisha that day, so he himself shouldn't worry about it either. Besides, she wouldn't even mind if Lady Krisha attacked her, to be honest. It would be even better if Liana tried to stab her, because then she will show her who is on top, who is in charge here. God, who is this? Don't you know her? She's Lady Noxia's twin sister. Loud whispers were heard behind Tanasia, and although those speaking tried to do it as quietly as possible, the girl heard everything, especially the conversations about how she had not received magical abilities and what she was doing here then. It was assumed that she had come to support her sister, and perhaps Sir Brelov had promoted his daughter and given her such a privilege. Trying to ignore the stupid gossip, Tanasia simply walked forward, accompanied by Asken. But out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something that caught her eye. The servant's entire aura oozed gloom. It seemed the girl understood what was going on. She asked him not to worry about what others said, because she didn't care about them. But I do care, the young man replied. And although Tanasia understood his mood to some extent, she was still worried that this would suddenly activate his ability. To somehow support him, she took Asken by the hand, and she repeated that she was asking him not to worry. This is an order, the girl added, and pulled the young man along with her. After some time, they moved to a less crowded place where no one would disturb them. From here, it seems, you can't hear what people are saying, the girl said, and only after that did she finally let go of Askan's hand. The young man looked closely at his hand, which the lady had just held, and said that it was against the rules. The girl didn't quite understand what he meant, because they came here so that he wouldn't hear what they were saying. So why was it against the rules? But the young man, looking down, noticed that he was not talking about that at all. Clenching his hand into a fist, still feeling the girl's touch, Asken gathered his courage. He realized that she had distracted his attention to something else. Exhaling, he said that nothing happened. Tanasia did not understand at all what he meant. She finally told him to ignore it and not to get upset about it all. After all, her value is not determined by strangers, she determines it herself. Tanasia is not moved by their words because she is completely confident in her qualifications to participate in the conference, so he too should proudly send him to the shoulders. Asken looked at her mistress with some admiration. What a strong girl she really was. Well said, lady, the young man added, closing his eyes. Before the competition begins, each participant must be assessed for the amount of magical power they possess, and this is done in a special mana measurement place. This is connected with the creation of a system of comparison and analysis of all people with unusual abilities with the previous conference, the current conference, and in general throughout history. Noxia was one of the first to pass through the special mana determination gates, and as soon as the girl overcame them, all the stones on the gates began to glow brightly purple. The young men waiting in line were surprised to see that this was the maximum power. As expected from Lady Noxia, she was amazing. Standing somewhere in the middle of the line, Tanasia watched her sister with admiration. She was always considered the main contender for first place. Tanasia is, without exaggeration, proud of her younger sister, Noxia. The next girl to approach the gate was another one. Tanasia opened her eyes in surprise because she knew without a doubt who it was. Now it's the turn of Liana Krisha, her former friend and now sworn enemy. Gathering her courage, the red-haired girl took a few steps forward. As soon as the girl passed through the gate, several magic stones lit up, but not all. As in the original, Leanna's magical powers are average. Tanasia's turn was already very close, and she was already starting to get a little worried. Finally, the next person, Lady Tanasha Brilova, was called, and the girl moved towards the gate slightly cautiously, all of this making her nervous. Suddenly, an evil laugh came from behind. Tanasia turned around to see who had let out that nasty laugh. And this is Leanna Krisha discussing with her friend that she doesn't understand how Lady Tanasia got to the conference, whether it's worth measuring mana at all when the result is obvious. Their conversation was picked up by other young people. Everyone knew that Tanasia had no special abilities and wondered whether it made sense to measure her magical power. "Why are you laughing?" Noxia interrupted their conversation. Yes, her sister did not participate in the conference due to the lack of special abilities, and this is quite natural. But Tanasia's case is not the first. Brilliant geniuses from other fields always participate in this conference, so why do they behave like this? And Tanasia, standing near the arch, asked Noxia not to worry. Everything would be fine with her. "I'm coming in," Tanasia announced and took a step forward. As expected, not a single magic stone in the gate caught fire. Naturally, she has no magical power, an obvious result, Leanna noted maliciously. However, looking at Tanasia, the girl was very surprised to see an unusual reaction for such a case. Tanasia Brelov smiled. She was pleased with the result. This surprised Leanna Krisha very much. She didn't understand why the girl was grinning. And Tanasia smiled, looking at her former friend. "While you can, laugh heartily, Leanna," the girl thought. Because after she sees what she's prepared, it's doubtful that you'll ever be able to laugh at her like that again. The next step after measuring your mana is to present your abilities at the Ability Testing Center. Proving how much your abilities have improved since the last conference is most important. And again, Noxia, as the most promising participant, was one of the first. Using her magical abilities, she controlled the flow of water. Her task was to fill various containers on the table, which she did an excellent job of. Although it was a fairly simple task, it required some concentration from the girl. Having filled the small containers, Noxia moved on to the large cubes standing on either side of her. The girl waved her hands and made the water currents move. She waved her arms again, sending them high above her head, spinning them into incredible shapes. Finally, showing all her magical power, the girl enveloped the entire hall in a transparent water dome. Her abilities greatly impressed all those watching, and they shouted and clapped their hands with joy. Noxia Brelov was a most outstanding young lady with high magical abilities. It was Leanna Krisha's turn to test the level of her magical abilities. There were several targets in front of the girl, which she had to hit with her power. She waved her arms, spinning the air currents and directing them towards the targets. This also required a lot of effort, but in the end, the air currents only slightly moved the first target. Leanna tried her best, but her magical abilities were not that great. With even more effort, she finally moved the first target towards the second, which was what she was required to do. Having done this, Leanna Krisha was quite pleased with herself, because it meant that she had passed the test. "Miss Leanna, you are great!" Shouts came from the audience, and the girl literally bathed in the general encouragement. And only Lady Brelov did not share this general admiration. Next, it was her turn, and Tanasia confidently stepped onto the stage. The host announced that Lady Tanasia Brelov was attending the conference because she was recognized as a genius in the field of magical engineering. Getting ready for the show, Tanasia took her weapon out of her holster. "We ask you to pay attention to the demonstration of a new weapon that she developed," the presenter continued. "The name of the weapon is K01. Tanasia took the pistol in both hands and raised it to chest level, simultaneously cocking the trigger. The judges sitting nearby were surprised that the weapon was so small, but noticed that the program indicated that 2 expensive magic stones were used in the assembly, but they did not represent the effectiveness of this weapon. Could it be that the Brelov family had promoted an incompetent person to the conference, they asked, while Olin Brelov himself sat right there as a judge. One of the speakers turned his head and found Sir Brelov next to him, and both speakers immediately fell silent, realizing that they had said too much. Olin said in a calm voice that he was going to watch a demonstration of a weapon made by his daughter, so why was he hearing extra noise? And turning to his faithful knight Jen, he ordered him to make a list of all those who had inadvertently spread false information here after the conference. They would deal with them according to the law. "I understand," answered the all-understanding knight, and his gaze was directed at the judges sitting nearby. And these two young men, who had so carelessly commented on the participant, sat like mice. There was one very active fan of Lady Tanasia Brailoff among the spectators. Even from her place on the stage, the girl felt the pressure of the teacher's expectation. "Lady Brailoff, you can shoot in that direction," the assistant on stage told her. The girl agreed, but looking where he pointed, she was slightly puzzled. The target I offered her to shoot at was too close and too small, so she asked again if they were thinking of testing the firepower of her weapon with this wooden target, to which she received an affirmative answer. "But it will be a bit small," the girl noted, and took a few steps to the side. So she found herself in front of a large target on which Lady Cretia had recently demonstrated her abilities. "This will be enough to show the power of my weapon," the girl added. Leanna, who was watching nearby, only snorted incredulously. She assumed that Tanasia was too self-confident. Ignoring everyone around her, Tanasia pointed her weapon towards the target. She spent several tense minutes taking aim and gathering her courage to shoot. The shot was so powerful that in a split second, a powerful wave rolled from the weapon in the girl's hands and headed towards the target. There was a deafening roar as the charge hit its target, shattering the target into pieces. With their hands down, Tanasia and everyone around them did not find the target in its place. There were only pieces of burnt wood, over which black smoke swirled, mixed with tongues of fire. Everyone around was very impressed by the power of the weapon, including Olan Brailoff. And only the teacher was very pleased with the student's performance, since he had already appreciated the power of the weapon last time. Noxia, who saw what her sister had done for the first time, gasped in surprise, while Ascon didn't even seem to express any emotion. And Lady Leanna Cretia was very surprised and even frightened, or rather even discouraged by what Tanasia was able to do. And Tanasia herself theatrically raised the barrel of the pistol to her mouth and blew on it, as if cooling it. "This is the weapon I developed, K01, the girl announced loudly. "Sister, that was amazing." Noxia was one of the first to run up to her older sister, expressing her admiration for her work. And could her older sister really have developed such a powerful weapon? The girl marveled. There was another man who made no particular attempt to hide his admiration. The teacher asked those around him if they had seen it, if they had seen everything exactly, what incredible power this small weapon could produce. Seeing how excited the teacher was, Tanasia decided to leave him alone and left the room herself. But the girl was not able to remain alone, as she was stopped by a stern male voice. Turning around to see who was addressing her, the girl immediately recognized him. It was Jen, her father's night bodyguard, who said that the leader wanted to meet her in the next room. At the same time, he asked Lady Noxia to wait here for a while, to which the girl hesitantly agreed. Tanasia noted that the atmosphere was somehow unusual, strict, and mysterious. When she finally came into the next room, Oland began the conversation by saying that the weapon she demonstrated was definitely designed by her, and the girl confirmed this. "Do you want to talk about K01? She asked hesitantly, turning to her father. He continued that he heard from Metella that she had developed an amazing weapon, but it turned out to be even more powerful than he imagined. On one hand, he is very happy that his daughter is so good at magical engineering, but on the other hand, he is worried, because the ultimate purpose of creating weapons is to use them in war or something similar. Someone might decide to take advantage of her talent." After thinking about her father's words for a while, Tanasia seemed to begin to understand what he was getting at. The development of her advanced weapons means strengthening the national power of the Arwen Empire, and at the same time, it can be seen as a threat to other countries. The conference is not only attended by Arwen residents, and the K01 demonstration will be perceived differently in each country. But of course, she thought about it and asked her father not to worry about it. She knows that there will be a war with the Kahlua Empire in the future, so this weapon was introduced in advance for the reason of creating the impression that Arwen's empire is not really that simple. And she replied to her father that she had set up a block so that K01 would not be used for improper purposes, and she had also consulted with her teacher about this in the future. If she received proposals from countries or individuals for K01, she would definitely consult with her father. "I know that with power comes responsibility, you can be sure of that," added Tanasia, looking into her father's eyes. Olan Brailoff was very impressed by his daughter's responsible attitude towards weapons. He thanked her for this, and the girl smiled sweetly, adding that as she understood, The power of K01 was so strong that it made him worry. But was he even a little happy? The man was very happy, and hadn't even said what he wanted to say because of his anxiety. "I'm proud of you, daughter," Olan said tenderly, stroking his daughter's head. The girl was grateful to her father for these words and smiled happily. She went out into the garden after talking with her father to avoid the people around her who kept following her. But now they were discussing that it was the young lady who had previously demonstrated the weapon called K01. The power of the weapon was so enormous, in addition. A detailed design of the weapon was presented. Those around asked each other and immediately answered that the details have not yet been revealed. But they say that all the participants of the conference were shocked. Tanasia heard everything again, and it seems that everyone is most interested in K01, which she developed. It feels like people's attitudes and views have changed a lot. Until recently, there was only contempt. Now they are full of envy and curiosity. At this time, not far from Tanasia, there was an unknown man who noticed a small stone under his feet. But the next moment, he kicked the stone so that it rolled right to the girl's feet. Feeling something near her leg, Tanasia lowered her eyes in surprise. Who kicked the stone? She thoughtfully turned her head. And soon she saw a young man nearby who, it seemed, kicked the stone. The fair-haired young man was dressed in a very revealing loose shirt and smiled mysteriously. The young man, whose face was hidden behind a mask, mysteriously propped up a tree, clearly waiting for Tanasia's reaction. And the first thing the girl noticed, and of course recognized, was the mask. It seems that this is the same person. The girl is slightly wary, since everything is not going according to plan again. "Lady Brylova?" "Right," the guy asked, and added affirmatively that it was she who demonstrated the magical weapon. He immediately introduced himself as Decane, and the girl became even more convinced that her plans were gradually collapsing. She already knew who it was. Deacon Sid Igtheon. He is the second main character who will fall in love with Noxia in the future. Tanasia didn't expect to meet him in this place. And why did he talk to her and not Noxia? In the novel, Noxia and Decane's first meeting occurred when he stopped her with a rock. But now the same situation happened to her, which made the girl worry. Tanasia understood that the original story was being distorted, but why did he approach her? For her, it was an extra headache. The young man regretted that he couldn't see it in person. People say that the weapon that the lady developed is very powerful, and thanks to his words, Tanasia understood what was going on. The original reason he approached Noxia was because he coveted Noxia's ability to control water. Decane is too ambitious. Although he currently lives as Igtheon's adopted son, he is actually the illegitimate son of Emperor Legant and wants to become the next emperor. The illegitimate son of Emperor Legant and the adopted son of Igtheon, and also a very ambitious person. That's the kind of person he is. Approaching the girl, the young man leaned towards her and asked what she was thinking about. Looking at him closely, Tanasia thought that he was like a snake. In order to become the next emperor of Legant, he strives to befriend people with outstanding abilities. The Legant Empire had a terrible relationship with the Kahlua Empire. The reason why war would break out in the Arwen Empire in the future is because it is geographically located between the two empires, and her goal was to prevent a future war with the Kahlua Empire. So there was a high probability that she would someday seek cooperation with the Legenta Empire. So everything that happens is for the best, the girl thought, and extended her hand to him. Touching the young man's face, Tanasia noticed that the mask looked very unusual. In fact, it was an opportunity for her. At first taken aback by such frankness, Decane soon pulled himself together and smiled contentedly. He replied that the fact is that Igtheon's traders cooperate with many countries, so they have to wear masks to hide their identity, and for security reasons. Tanasia assumed so, but still asked if he couldn't show his face to anyone, to which Decane replied that he couldn't until he became an adult capable of defending himself. Returning the girl's gesture, removing a leaf that had fallen into her hair, he noticed that he could show his face to his beloved, because he will still end up with a family with that same girl. Tanasia did not expect such a turn of events and was a little stupefied, wondering what to do next. Taking the girl's confusion for his victory, the young man smiled mysteriously, but the girl surprised him because she soon took another step. "Somehow it's even romantic," said Tanasia, coquettishly twirling a strand of hair around her finger. Throwing away the ill-fated leaf he had taken from her hair, the young man hesitated for a second, but then said that her smile was sweeter than he had imagined. The girl froze with her hair twirled around her finger. It seems like everything is not going according to plan, far from her plans. It was strange for her to hear that something about her was cute. It was even somehow new to her, to which Decane retorted that it seemed to him that she often heard that. But since Tanaja insisted that there was nothing cute about her, the young man thought about it and looked at her carefully. The girl looked attractive, and he looked her over from head to toe. Rather, you are one of those who are usually called unloved, and in some ways otherwise. The young man began to speak, but he was unable to finish since their conversation was interrupted by Askan, who was intensively searching for his mistress. Tanaja, as well as her interlocutor, were very engrossed in each other's conversation, and were very surprised by his appearance. She asked the servant how he knew he was there, to which he received the answer that she had not returned for a long time, so he went to look for her. Decane looked carefully at the one who had interrupted their conversation, assessing him as a rival. Naturally, he didn't like this new interlocutor who had interrupted his conversation with the girl. I was worried, Askan added, also returning the young man's suspicious look. Then, turning to his mistress, he added that Lady Noxia was waiting for her in the room, which made Tanaja hurry to go to her. The next time we meet, I will be able to call you Tanaja, the young man asked the girl, to which he received the answer that he could do as he wanted, and Askan really didn't like this slippery guy who had so immediately gained the trust of his mistress. Without delaying another minute, Tanaja, accompanied by her servant, went to her sister. Decane watched them go, and a wicked thought came to his mind. She's definitely not cute anymore, he said quietly, but loud enough for Askan to hear, which made Lady Tanaja's servant stop dead in his tracks when he heard the stranger discussing his mistress. The next words regarding his mistress, describing her as a girl, made Askan turn around indignantly. However, there was no one near the tree. It was as if the stranger had disappeared without a trace. Tanaja noticed that Askan had fallen a little behind her and asked what was the matter. He said nothing, only suspiciously looking around the area, but was clearly dissatisfied with the stranger's behavior. Before disappearing, the stranger said that Tanaja was definitely no longer sweet, but the one you want to conquer, the mistress. Understanding what the young man meant, Askan began to get angry. His hands involuntarily clenched into fists, but he tried to restrain himself, realizing that everything could end badly, and he answered the lady that nothing had happened. Tanaja arrived in her and Noxia's room. Jaren, who was there, said with surprise that today she couldn't even see Lady Noxia, especially since she wasn't expecting her here. "What's the matter, Askan?" she asked her servant, to which he calmly replied that he must have been mistaken. But since Tanaja had returned to the room, she sat down on the edge of the bed and assumed that tomorrow the sun would rise from the west. Since Askan had mixed something up, it seemed that something was wrong with him. The young man apologized, and Tanaja replied that it was okay since she was heading home anyway. When she met Decane, she understood that it wouldn't be so easy with him because he was also a sly one. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by an unusual teaching sound coming from the belly of the servant Jaren, to which the girl apologized for not being able to eat today. She looked carefully at her maid and, having made some decisions, turned to Jaren. "I thought you said there was a restaurant around here somewhere," she asked the surprised girl. After a while, Jaren was already happily gobbling up the offered food. She thanked the lady for the opportunity to try all these dishes, to which Tanaja happily added that she should eat as much as she wanted because she had to do a lot of hard work today, and Askana too. The girl was enjoying her glass of drink when some unfamiliar girls approached her and asked if she was Lady Brilova. One of the girls introduced herself as Salinger from the Largent Empire and remarked that she was shocked by what she saw of K01 in the demonstration hall, and if possible, she would like to befriend Tanaja. The girl agreed and suggested going for a walk together and talking, thinking that there was nothing wrong with building friendly relationships. Turning to her servants, she added that she would go out for a short walk. Askan really didn't want the lady to go out alone, but there was nothing he could do. Accompanied by new acquaintances, Tanaja headed towards the exit of the restaurant. Passing other tables, she noticed the girls sitting at one of them. Liana Krisha also came here to eat, Tanaja realized with surprise. And even Liana's friends, whose names it doesn't know. But they were the ones who gathered together and laughed at her during the conference. Tanaja was overcome with some anger. She wanted to show Liana her place, and the girl's gaze fell on the long hem of the dress of one of Lady Krisha's friends, which was lying on the floor near the table. A cunning plan immediately formed in her head. Liana Krisha and her hangers-on would definitely pay for their behavior today. So step by step, she approached the table at which the girls were sitting, and one of her steps landed right on the long hem of the dress. The girl immediately became indignant, sensing what was happening, but turning around, she recognized Tanaja Brailov with horror. "Lady Brailov, please look ahead where you are going. You might even step on other people's dresses," the girl said indignantly. But Tanaja replied that, to her surprise, it was a dress because of the rough material. She thought it was a carpet, which greatly angered the girl. "Besides, don't you think you're blocking the way?" Tanaja added contemptuously. The girl, whose dress Tanaja had stepped on, was quite disconcerted and looked at Lady Krisha in a hunted manner, who in turn was outraged by Lady Brailov's behavior. "Stop it. We all understand that you stepped on purpose," Leanna began to say. But Tanasia's gaze noticed a glass of champagne on the table next to her. The next moment, with a slight movement of the hand, the glass tipped over so that the entire drink spilled onto Leanna Krishi's red dress. She immediately screamed that Tanasia had gone crazy and what the hell she was doing, to which Lady Brailov feigned that she had just been surprised by accident that they had suddenly spoken to her in such a tone. Trying to maintain the same indignant tone, Liana said that if she continued in the same spirit, but Tanasia interrupted her, asking what would happen in that case. Leanna's eyes, although burning with rage, also flashed with some fear. "Compared to how you humiliated me, isn't this merciful?" Tanasia leaned closer to her former friend, simultaneously lowering her voice, which made her sound quite ominous. And she added that thanks to her, this mediocre dress would have to be changed, so Liana should also be grateful. Then something seemed to switch, and Tanasia smiled very friendly with her eyes. Turning around to leave the restaurant, she wished the girls a wonderful appetite and left. Leanna Krisha and her friends remained sitting at the table, trying to recover from their unexpected conversation with Lady Tanasia Brailov. Finally, one of the girls said in a stuttering voice, "Even if she was from the Brailov family, wasn't that too much?" And the second added that Tanasia had only attracted attention with an insignificant development and already thought that she had the right to behave like that. And was Lady Krisha really going to put up with all this? But Leanna was not going to. There she goes again with her mediocrity, thought Leanna. What the hell? Tanasia is looking down on him and her. This is what Leanna Krisha thought until the very moment she heard conversations at the next table and realized that some of the people there were familiar. Jaren asked Uskan what about the carriage they arrived in. And the young man tried to answer her, but his gaze was fixed on Lady Leanna Krisha, who was looking straight at him. Tanasia's former friend immediately told her interlocutors that she had an idea. One of the girls was glad that Leanna had an idea on how to teach Tanasia a lesson. "Lady Brailov's personal servant, the last time we saw each other, it seemed to me that she cared about her slave," Leanna said in an even voice. "Sometimes a person himself talks about his weaknesses. Besides, Leanna remembered how last time Tanasia warned her that if she touched her people again, she would not leave it so easily. Tanasia herself let it slip. Although they cannot touch Lady Brailov herself, her personal servant is another matter," said Leanna, picking up the knife lying on the table. "Even if they kill a slave, they will not bear any official responsibility. In the worst case, they will have to pay for the slave, ransoming him." "Then maybe we should express our feelings on the slave," the girl added, her eyes shining with rage. The next day, the magic conference continued, and today Tanasia would oversee the testing of other participants. But something went wrong. A young man called out to a girl passing by, asking her to give him a little time. And although the girl replied that she was a little busy at the moment, the young man insisted that it would take only a little while, and that they would talk about the weapon that she had developed. But quickly answering that she had no intention of distributing her development for now, Tanasia immediately hurried off to attend to her business. She ran as fast as she could to avoid this unpleasant conversation, but in fact she was fed up with all of this. At every opportunity, she is surrounded by strangers offering a deal to distribute weapons. Tanasia realized that her father's worries were not in vain. Perhaps if she were a little younger, her teeth would immediately tell her and she would sign a contract with someone. "Lady Brailova, please, let's talk a little." Another young man tried to stop the girl running past, but she only sped up, trying to avoid all such conversations. She even hid in the garden, but these persistent people kept trying to find her. From all sides came the cry, "Let's talk a little about weapons, Lady Brailova," and the girl's patience was already running out. She literally felt like a star surrounded by persistent fans, from whom she could not hide, could not escape. She only desperately asked for help from at least someone. Someone suddenly grabbed the girl's hand while she was running away from her pursuers and pulled her towards him. Not expecting this at all, she moved towards the one who pulled her by inertia. With bated breath, she watched from behind a barely visible niche as those who were looking for her looked around. Where did she suddenly disappear to? The men wondered, completely unaware of the girl standing in a small but dark niche in the corridor. The young man, who had saved her from her pursuers in such a timely manner, put his finger to his lips, silencing her. "Shh," was heard barely audibly, and Tanasia was surprised to find that same stranger from the garden in front of her. The pursuers were outraged that they hadn't even explained anything properly, and decided to split up and look for Lady Tanasia some more. When they finally left, the girl thanked her savior for his help. Decane only smiled slightly, accepting her gratitude. "No need to thank me, Tanasia," as he promised. At their next meeting, he simply called the girl by her first name. And Tanasia was very surprised by this, and he, noticing her surprise, asked if she had really forgotten that she had allowed him to call her by name, to which the girl replied that of course not. It was just somehow even too natural. Decane was glad that he could help, and still wanted to ask about K01 himself. Hearing that he also wanted to know about her weapon, she immediately rushed out of the niche, trying to escape and shouting that she was very busy, but was stopped by a tenacious grip. Forced to stop, the girl listened as he explained that he had no intention of distributing her weapons, and when she asked why, the young man replied that everything was logical, because K01 was not yet complete. Hearing these words from the young man, Tenasia's eyes widened. This was completely different from what one could hear from a man like Decane Igtheon.